Hello, everybody.
Wow.
Welcome to Lorebeards and Roleplaying. Today we have our awesome special guest, Mike Mason. There he is, everybody. Vera, why don't you introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce myself, and then we'll let Mike introduce himself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vera. I am one of the writers for Warhammer Fantasy, the Old World, and for Age of Sigmar Soulbound. I make stuff, I do things.
That's right. And she's got her own channel, of course, as a VTuber, which is pretty awesome.
I do things as this. Yes, I'm very online.
Hi, my name's Ross Watson. I'm a game designer and author who's done a whole bunch of Warhammer 40k roleplay, as you can see behind me, as well as a number of 40k video games. And I worked at the Games Workshop headquarters in Glen Burnie for a couple of years. So that's my 40k background. But I also have worked on a whole bunch of other role-playing games that I'm just not going to get into because we're going to let Mike Mason talk about how awesome he is. Mike, it's so awesome to have you with us. I'm excited as hell.
Hello. Well, thanks for inviting me on. It's a pleasure to be here. I too have been to Glen Burnie, but I didn't work there. I just visited once or twice back in the day. Fond memories actually of Glen Burnie, but that seems like a lifetime away. But hello, yeah, hi. I'm Mike Mason. Hi.
And Mike, you make a lot of stuff for Chaosium these days. Is that right?
Yeah, my kind of full-time gig these days is well, how do I call it? Orchestrating, managing, looking after the Call of Cthulhu tabletop role-playing game line. So Eldritch horrors in the 1920s, modern day, Victorian era, wherever. And I've been doing that for 12 years or so now. Developing the game, well, I can't say new edition of the game. It was released, some years ago now, but the current edition of the Call of Cthulhu game I co-wrote with my friend Paul Fricker, who also now works with me writing and developing Call of Cthulhu material for the game. But before that, as you well know, I worked on a little game that was a little bit popular at the time called Dark Heresy, which was the first Warhammer 40k tabletop role-playing game. At that time, I also helped and worked on the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay and the board games of the time. So that would be Talisman 4th edition.
Great version of the game, by the way. I have that one.
Yeah. So I did that for a little while before that all kind of changed overnight, and Games Workshop moved on from developing board games and role-playing games to concentrate back on their war games and kind of associated fiction and so on. And then in between I've done other things and pieces in the games industry and outside the games industry. But yeah, people mainly know me for either heretical inquisitors or mad cultists. That tends to be my role-playing bag, as it were. So it tends to be grim horror, mystery, that kind of thing. So,
well, awesome. I mean, you're in the right space, and we have a black background today just for that particular hue of role playing, as it were.
A bit of a darker energy. Good fun.
We are seeing comments from both Twitch and YouTube, so I'm assuming everybody can hear us. And we have a member, Biofoot7874, one of our favorites. Perfect, another authority on the Fishmen menace, he says. Biofoot loves Fishmen, and he will always want to talk about Fishmen. So,
yeah, I suppose Innsmouth is a different flavor of Fishman, but
yeah, Innsmouth is like the original flavor. It's like the OG Fishman.
Yeah, just about.
So, if it's okay with you guys, I would like to start by talking to Mike about that first edition of Dark Heresy, because it's a wild ride. As far as my research has shown me, there's a lot of interesting stuff. So, would that be all right with you two? Yeah, there it is.
Oh, sounds great.
I don't know if you can see.
Beautiful.
This is I wrote. This is my desk copy when I worked in Black Industries, and it says the words Black Industries on the top, and it says what's it say? I can't read it now. Office off his copy, which was basically me saying, "Hands off, don't touch, don't steal it from my desk because I need it every day to refer to things." So yeah, that's an original one. That's not a Fancy Flight one. That's a Black Industries one. So
yeah, very rare. Very rare. So to talk about why it's so rare, we should get into the Wayback Machine and transport ourselves back to 2005-ish. And this was about the time that demand for Warhammer 40,000 as a role-playing game was reaching a fever pitch. The first edition of Warhammer 40,000, also called Rogue Trader, was kind of a role-playing game, less of a war game than as we think of it today, because it had a referee and there were other mechanics that were kind of role-playing game-esque. But there hadn't been any role-playing games about Warhammer 40,000 for almost 20 years at that point. It would have been 18 years.
Yeah, I mean, and as you say, Rogue Trader, the original 40K book, was a strange thing. It was kind of, it was really a skirmish war game, but like the first edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, Warhammer, the original boxed Warhammer game, which called itself a role-playing game. It wasn't a role-playing game. It was a skirmish war game. But to sell more copies and to try and get visibility, they kind of tried to have their cake and eat it. And so this is a war game, but it's also a role-playing game. And you could, as you say, you can do both things with it with a bit of work. But and so yeah, that 40K Rogue Trader just sort of was such a popular book. I mean, it launched years and years, and the product, that one book release, in terms of the 40K universe, in terms of fiction and comics and games, video games. I mean, it's amazing that one book spawned so much so quickly, and that people really loved it. And so yeah, it was definitely always in the DNA to kind of at some point bubble away and eventually kind of birth an actual role-playing game. But it was one of those things that at Games Workshop, never really thought it was ever going to happen, because it was kind of, GW had become very much a tabletop wargaming company, miniatures company. And, although it started as a role-playing, selling role-playing games and actually, publishing English versions and licensed versions of role-playing games from America, I mean, that stopped, they stopped to concentrate solely on the Warhammer properties back in the day. And so the thought that they would go back and say, hey, let's do a role-playing game was kind of like, no one really suspected that would ever happen, really. There kind of has already been rumors, but no one really thought that would happen until one day I was chatting to a colleague at Games Workshop who said, I've got a new job. I said, oh, what's that? Oh, I'm going to head up a new division for games and role-playing games. What? It blew my mind. I didn't think we were doing that anymore. And oh no, they've kind of gone mad and given me a budget, and I can basically try and do some stuff. And so they were instrumental, obviously, getting the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, revivified and new life into that. Working with Green Ronin to produce that line of books, and so on, and then they moved on to other things, and then I think it was other people came in to do a bit more, and then it kind of got to a point where they needed someone to kind of work on and finish Dark Heresy by the deadline that they'd been quoted, and so Muggins was kind of got the job to finish Dark Heresy, and it was really a baptism of fire to thrown in to get that done. I think I can't remember exactly how many months I had to do it in. I think it was, I kind of had like 4 to 6 months, maybe 6 months. 6 months sounds too long. I think it was like 4, maybe 5 months, maybe, to have maybe 2/3 written manuscript for the Dark Heresy rulebook, and then come in and finish it and lay it out and get it done, and and get it done to deadline, and which was, as I say, an interesting challenge.
Well, Vera is a huge Dark Heresy fan, so I'm going to let her talk about that a little bit.
Oh, I love the game. It was my intro to like Warhammer role-playing games in general. I've played a good bit and quite a fan of the system. I am curious as like where you came in, what the vision was for the game, where it was at, and what you wound up developing in that 4-month span.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the majority of stuff had been done. I mean, obviously, I can reveal, depends how, who's listening, what secrets I can reveal prior to me joining. But I mean, before I did that as a job, I obviously worked in Games Workshop doing other things. And one of those other things, I signed up to do the playtest for the original version of Dark Heresy, which was very different to the version that actually came out. And I remember seeing the playtest version and kind of being somewhat shocked, like thinking this isn't 40K in any way. And this is slightly strange. This version, maybe I'm missing something. So I actually, by fortune, the person who was actually the heading the Black Library division at the time, in which Black Industries sat, was an old boss of mine. So I was able to kind of catch them for a cup of coffee one morning and say, "Can I just tell you what I think? Because I might be wrong, because I might be missing some. I don't know what's actually going on inside Black Industries, but I've seen the playtest and I'm a little worried." And so because they knew me, they said, "Oh yeah, let's go and have a coffee." And then I bent their ear for an hour or so, telling them what I thought was good and what I thought wasn't so good, and what I would do differently. And that, I don't know, I wouldn't go so far as to say that it was down to me to change things. I think I was just one person among many who had some critical comments on the original kind of playtest versions of the game. But it wasn't very long thereafter that they decided to actually change the system entirely and change who was developing and writing it, and it was taken in-house. And Kate Flack and my other co-author Owen, those guys were brought in to actually develop a rule set which was going to be more closely based around the kind of Warhammer Fantasy rule set rather than a completely different one. So those guys came in. So that kind of prehistory kind of predated in terms of my involvement. In terms of, I was one of the collective who kind of had a bit of a moan about the playtest, which obviously someone there banked, because then when Kate and Owen decided that they'd kind of done what they can and decided to move on, there was a gap in terms of somebody needed to come in, actually, project manage and finish the actual book as well. So I applied and I kind of got the job. And one of the reasons I got the job was because obviously I made a fuss about it. But the other more important reason I got the job was because previous to that, I had done a fanzine, the Call of Cthulhu fanzine, and so I was used to. Well, as I was talking to I'd actually produced something and actually done a fanzine. There was a kind of an acknowledgement that I kind of understood what I was doing, or at least I could show a bit of commitment to doing something. So I got the job of managing Black Industries, which was mainly a job in terms get Dark Heresy finished. So as I say, there was about 4 months or so. So I just had printed everything out that had been written. It was a big kind of lever arch file of A4 pages, and would go through reading it and making notes and work out, is there a gap here? What's missing? What isn't clear in terms of the rules or the setting? And trying to complete the book, really. Things like there wasn't a mention of bolters in the book, so it's kind of like, well, I think we need to mention bolters somewhere as a ubiquitous gun in 40K, and people kind of expect something to be about Maltas in there, that kind of stuff, and just making sure that the character progression was working and the skill system kind of worked, but it was mainly kind of filling gaps and trying to identify where there were issues and solving them, and just trying to get the game finished, really. But of course, you both worked in publishing in that sense. Writing a game isn't finishing a game. It's just the first part of finishing the game. Because then I spent a lot of time working with my colleagues in Black Industries. So we had Zoe, who was working as the art director and coming up with, searching through the archives of Games Workshop. There was thousands of pieces of art and trying to pull them together and working with artists to kind of, create the look of Dark Heresy. And then I was working with very closely to Mark Rayner, who was the layout and who did the actual kind of style guide and design of the book as well. And so, he was laying it out as I was trying to correct things and proofread at the same time. And we had some external proofreaders who were sending in pages and we're trying to. So in the last month, prior to the deadline, which was a hard deadline, I'd be coming in, me and Mark would be arriving in the morning for a 9 o'clock start. And then we would not be leaving till 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, because we would just work through all evening, working through corrections and putting them. And I would be literally going, okay, so page 24, paragraph 2, line 16, change the comma, kind of literally reading out corrections. And because there was so many, because it was such a rush job and a number of different people had done stuff, and I was trying to just pull it together, that it was still very much a learning process for me. So there's a lot of errors basically, so we were trying to get as many of those errors fixed, and so long nights and every day of the week. So we were pretty tired by the end of it, but while we didn't catch every error, we did get the book finished enough that it could be published, which was the major achievement, really, given that we didn't think we were going to meet the deadline. We thought we were going to miss the deadline because there was so much work to do on it. And I have to say, Mark did an amazing job pulling it together. So my thanks to him as always. But it was, I don't say it lightly when I say it was a Herculean effort. It really was. It was, a lot of work to get that done in the timescale that we had. But I'm very pleased we managed to do that. And my colleague Mal, who was our kind of sales manager, was kept egging us on because he was saying, well, I've sold 30,000 copies before launch. And I said, well, that's brilliant. That's 30,000 copies is brilliant. Can we make it 40,000 copies? Because that would be cooler. But
thematic.
But we didn't quite make 40,000, but we certainly sold 30,000, which was at
the time, that's huge.
Pretty good. Even now, that's pretty good.
Agreed. We have a couple of super chats I would like to read. Super chats are the way that people support the show and support us directly. Mm-hmm. If you want to see more Lorebeards and role playing, that's how you do it, is with super chat. So we will read those aloud. Azure Shadow 88, thank you so much for your support, sir. He says, any one of you ever played Delta Green? The ability to explore deep emotion and concepts in a role-playing game draws me. Unfortunately, I don't think I can ever get a game running. Not many people want to delve that deep. Delta Green, I'll say this. Delta Green is my favorite role-playing game that I've never played. I've always wanted to play it. Like, I really, really want to play it, but I never have. It's so cool, though.
Likewise, I'm super curious about it. For context, Delta Green is inspired by the Call of Cthulhu system and mythos, but you are well-armed. The idea is that you're marching into battle with these cosmic horrors and are perhaps a little better prepared than many investigators might be in a traditional Call of Cthulhu game.
Well, it's more like a spy agency than a military group, but you're right. They are far more well-equipped typically than a 1920s.
It depends. I have played a lot of Delta Green in my time because what you may not realize is Delta Green did start actually as a Call of Cthulhu setting. So, and in fact, you can still buy the original Delta Green books, which actually work, which run off the Call of Cthulhu game system. Obviously, over time, the guys at Pagan Publishing and Arc Dream designed their own game system, and it's kind of gone that way now. But it's all very, as you say, we're all playing in the same playground of eldritch horrors and whatnot. And as you're right, Delta Green is very much a kind of, was born out of a kind of a strange kind of bastard child of the X-Files. Well, not it kind of happened before the X-Files, but it's a bit like the X-Files, as in you got government agencies and conspiracies and people not being trusting one another. And so you can be, as you say, you can be tooled up with appropriate firepower, but as in most Cthulhu style games, that will do you no good whatsoever, because if your gun might look cool, but if the monster bullets just pass right through it, then your gun is useless. So but yeah, I mean, Delta Green's good fun game, and it just comes down to what kind of style of game you like, whether you like that kind of guns and modern day kind of conspiracy kind of stuff, or so on. I mean, I've got Cthulhu games that you've got modern day Cthulhu games where the difference with Cthulhu and Call of Cthulhu and Delta Green tends to be, in Call of Cthulhu you tend to play kind of regular folk rather than a well-armed government agency in that sense. So you tend to play kind of normal folk encountering the horror. Whereas Delta Green, you obviously are in a kind of an organization, whether it's covert or not. So it's just different styles of play. But at the end of the day, the monsters tend to look similar.
If you buy only one book of Delta Green, I recommend Countdown, because Countdown is excellent. Yeah,
Countdown was a good book back in the day. Yeah,
I'd agree that kind of setting's a great place to explore real emotions and these concepts of how to deal with trauma and madness and all of these things, though. It's sort of a hallmark of these more grim settings for an RPG.
Yeah,
a little less wargamey, a little more conceptual.
Yeah, I mean, but there are plenty, there's plenty non-horror games these days on the market where there's a lot of kind of deep characterization, exploration of whether it's a horror or a more kind of historically based game, that kind of thing, where you are kind of re-experiencing some historical event or whatever. There's a lot of them out there, and again, there are many different styles of game and many different styles of role-playing game, and some of them will appeal to you and some of them won't. It's just like TV. Some programs you're going to like, some programs aren't for you. It's the same with role-playing games. Some are going to be what you want to do, some are not.
Vera, would you like to read this super chat?
Yes, thank you so much, Skylar Martin, who is vaguely familiar with Rogue Trader. But what is Dark Heresy about from a setting perspective, Skylar asks?
Well, that's a good question.
What is Dark Heresy about?
Dark Heresy, obviously, it's set in the world of Warhammer 40,000, the far future, the grim, dark future, as they nowadays call it, where, if you listen to the propaganda, there is only war. However, there isn't only war, is there really? Because if there's only war... somebody's got to make the bullets and so on. What Dark Heresy does is explore the non-war bits of the Warhammer 40,000 universe. So rather than being, in some battle with the Eldar or the Tau or whatever, or the Orcs, you are in the Imperium of Mankind, and you are basically the agents or the operatives of an Imperial Inquisitor, who sends you on missions to root out heresy and conspiracies and the kind of the rot within. There you go.
I want you for the Imperial Inquisition. That's the T-shirt I'm wearing today.
The rot within the Imperium, which can be, which can just be, alien infestation or demonic conspiracy, the taint of chaos, trying to pull things apart, all these different kind of things that are trying to destroy the Imperium. Your job in Dark Heresy to try and root that out and stop it happening, basically. So it's a very much a mystery-based approach to gaming, where you have a mystery of some kind you're trying to solve. And sometimes it can be more direct. It could be, the mystery could just be, there's a terrible plague. You need to go and find the source of it and stop it happening. So it can be very immediate, or it can be a much more slow burn kind of conspiracy with people not knowing whether you can trust people or not. And obviously, because you're playing agents of the Imperium, agents of the Inquisition, no one trusts you anyway, because you're all basically running around a bit like Judge Dredd, going, "I am the law, and you will do what I say." And so you have a trying to deal with the average guy who works in a munitions factory or something, who's just trying to live, but you're going in and trying to muscle down and get some information. There's a lot of it's very kind of noirish in a way, that kind of almost a kind of a mix of that kind of film noir kind of mystery, the Maltese Falcon crossed with sci-fi and grim darkness and chaos and aliens and that kind of thing. So it's a great kind of mishmash of all these things, but ultimately it's about kind of running around the Imperium and trying to find corruption and heretical stuff going on, basically.
Good answer.
Yeah, great answer. It's special. It takes that whole perspective down to the ground in this setting that's otherwise very high-flying, bolters and enormous vessels in the sky.
We would often ask ourselves when we're writing the game, it's like, well, what does a bar look like in 40k land? Because there aren't any bars, on the war planets, are there? And so what does a bar look like? And who goes to it? Who can afford to? Can they afford to? What do they sell there? Where do they get their food? How do people live in the middle of the Imperium? And all these kind of questions. Some of them were kind of vaguely answered through some of the fiction, some of the Black Library fiction, but most of it hadn't. Because obviously in a role-playing game, that's exactly the kind of stuff you need to know, because that's the stuff your players are interacting with. They aren't running around, jumping through, flames and on some warp planet shooting orcs. They're dealing with something down the lane, basically dealing with the factory down the road. So you're having to kind of work out what the real world looks like in the 40k universe, and it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, because you have to flesh out all of the space between these iconic characters and locations. Like, what's between the Space Marine and the Inquisitor? Well, quite a lot, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that. And obviously, the whole kind of thing is, each Inquisitor is very different. They've all got their own kind of style of doing things, and they're all working for different parts of the kind of inquisitorial order. There's the ones who are specialists in alien hunting. There's the chaos hunters and so forth. And then you've got the kind of the kind of guys in the middle, the kind of characters you're playing, but they're coming with their own kind of agendas. The Adeptus Mechanicus, with all their shenanigans and kind of building things and strangeness on Mars. And do they actually worship some strange god in the middle of Mars? What's going on there? And then you've got psychers who are dealing with the warp and have got like spell-like abilities. And they're, no one trusts the psyker, because if you stand too close to them, you're gonna get blown up or turned into a toad or something. And you've got this kind of, and that's why the game is fun, because you've got clear missions, go and do X, go and find out X and solve it. But you've got a bunch of real kind of strange characters who all do crazy things and get themselves into trouble, basically. And the fun is kind of trying to work your way through all of that kind of craziness.
Now, you just said that there were lots of different kinds of Inquisitors, and Dark Heresy features many of these different kinds of Inquisitors in the core book. Vera had a question. She wanted to know if any of those characters, specifically Cade, Inquisitor Cade, was a player character at one point. Right? Vera, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just curious to know if some of the inspiration for specific named characters in the books came from playtest material or developed out fiction behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, yeah. I mean, I'm going back now to try and remember any specific things, but yeah, a lot of the. I mean, we would, some of us in Black Industries, we would meet up and play test things and play the odd scenario and just get together after work basically, and so wherever whenever you're trying to come up with a name for someone, often you would rely on someone's character name or the name of a colleague that you would twist to make it a little bit 40k-ish kind of thing, just to kind of inject a little bit of Easter egg fun into there basically, because most people would never know, but and there's a long history in Games Workshop games of what you might call hidden humor, that from Rick Priestley. I mean, you read the original Dark Heresy, you read some of the early Warhammer stuff, there's little lines that Rick will have put in there that are just comedy gold, but you only kind of know they're comedy if in a sense. It's like a long time I used to meet people who didn't really understand that the emperor sat on the golden throne was a joke, that the golden throne is a toilet. That's the emperor sat on the toilet is the imperial man, and so there's all these things that Rick put in, and so it was important. I thought it was important to kind of keep that humor, that kind of tongue-in-cheek humor, without it being too overt, without it becoming silly and changing the style of the game. But it's these little touches that kind of just, if So there's a table in Dark Heresy where I think it's a Psycho table where there's one outcome that involves, or there's a memory you have of these bold women and they're, which is clearly, if Dune. That's a reference to Dune and the Bene Gesserit, but it's not, it's not overt, and it's only if So there's a lot of little bits of humor. So the names that you were talking about, Vera, a lot of that kind of comes from, those kind of things, or literally me sat there thinking, I got to think of a name for an Inquisitor. Little, how does that sound? Some of them are literally. So I mean, when we did the limited edition 200 books first limited edition run of Dark Heresy, one of the kind of things we did was every book had its own Inquisitor. Every book was meant to be owned by a different Inquisitor. So someone had to come up with 200 names, and that someone was me. So,
wow.
So,
oh no.
So 200 names and 200 certificates of authenticity each signed differently by that Inquisitor. So
did you sign each one?
And I signed every one.
Nice.
Well done. I have trouble coming up with 10 names for an adventure, like 200. Oh my god.
Yeah, so it did kill me for a few days. I think that did. So,
We usually there from like 9 to like 10 p.m. That's a 13-hour day of just a name.
So now you know why there is only 200 limited editions.
Vera, would you like to read the next super chat?
Yeah, absolutely. Team Web, thank you so much. To discuss the creation of the Dark Heresy RPG and how that influenced Call of Cthulhu, part of our topic for today. Wait, I thought Shadow over Bogenhaven, the adventure for Warhammer Fantasy, was Cthulhu, but in Warhammer. Who influenced who first?
That's a very astute question. So, I mean, the truth of the matter is, Call of Cthulhu influenced all of the above. Because Call of Cthulhu was the first one that came out, and that came out in Halloween 1981 was the first edition of Call of Cthulhu. And what followed thereafter with Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, with the Enemy Within campaign, literally in Games Workshop, the order of the day was, we want to write an adventure for this game that's kind of like a Call of Cthulhu adventure. That was literally the brief. So hence why Shadows over Bogenhafen it feels almost like a Call of Cthulhu adventure, because it's a mystery, it's an investigation. So when Call of Cthulhu first came out, there was no real game that was basically about a mystery and an investigation. It was the first investigative style role-playing game that existed. Obviously, there were some games already that had elements of investigation, such as Dungeons and Dragons had Ravenloft, which was a kind of sort of investigation, not really, but kind of. You could run it that way if you wanted, but it wasn't set up to be that, but you could run it that way. And there was other games again. So particular scenarios might have had kind of the feeling of an investigation, but the rules did not support an investigation, as in they weren't designed to be an investigative rule set. That D&D, as you know, is about bashing things and stealing treasure. It's not about solving mysteries in the same way, as in you can do it in the game, but there is no mechanic to say, did I solve the mystery, other than maybe an intelligence roll. So Call of Cthulhu was the first game that actually, with the BRP system that allows for a range of different skills, so you could apply a different range of challenges that different skills could overcome. You build a system that can actually handle the investigation. So being very long-winded here, but basically Call of Cthulhu came first. That definitely influenced the Enemy Within campaign, Shadows of Boganoff, and Warhammer Fantasy kind of style of play. And then where are we? What was the other one? Dark Heresy. And Dark Heresy certainly, if it wasn't already influenced by Call of Cthulhu, it certainly was by the time I started working on it, because I've been playing Call of Cthulhu since 1981 for some 20 years or so. So clearly, when with Dark Heresy being an investigative game, there were lessons I could bring in from Call of Cthulhu into Dark Heresy. And so it was a natural kind of synergy, and it literally privately I would say internally it's like Call of Cthulhu. It's like sci-fi Call of Cthulhu basically is what I was trying to aim at in terms of the style of play. Obviously the setting is very different and the feel is quite different, but overarchingly, if I could get the idea that you're investigating a mystery and there are certain challenges and clues you've got to find and overcome, and as you piece that mystery together, it becomes bigger and more scary, then that's like a Call of Cthulhu mystery. So that's what we were trying to aim for in a similar way to some degree with Dark Heresy.
Now, my research tells me that Dark Heresy was your first, I'm going to design a game project.
Yeah, that was my first proper. I mean, obviously, I've been playing role-playing games for many years, and I've been designing scenarios and running scenarios and publishing a fanzine and doing all that kind of stuff. So I had done some stuff, but I hadn't worked on a complete rule set in that sense. I hadn't designed a game from nearly scratch, as it were, but or worked with some other authors to design a game. So that was my first proper we need to design a game that's going to sell books and that kind of thing.
Fascinating, because I have a very similar story about Wrath and Glory. But I would like to ask you, so if Dark Heresy was your first, I'm going to design the game, the rule book, the core rules, and then after Dark Heresy you went to Call of Cthulhu, were there things that you learned from working on Dark Heresy that applied to your time working on Call of Cthulhu? Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, everything you do, you learn from. I mean, everything, particularly in game design and publishing games, it's a continuum of trying to do better every time. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the first edition, the very first edition of Warhammer of Dark Heresy, while we strive to make it as error-free as possible, there's still millions of errors in it. There's millions of typos, millions of errors that we didn't have time to fix or we missed. And that's partly down to me not being as proficient as I could be, not being as eagle-eyed as I could be, not having enough time to get other people involved, get a good copy editor involved, a good proofreader involved, and so you learn these things. You learn that actually the writer isn't the best editor for the book that they wrote. No,
it's impossible. Yeah, but I was kind of, because of the time constraints, that's kind of why we were working that way. But when it came to Call of Cthulhu, obviously I didn't have the same kind of you've got 4 months to get a book out. We had a much more kind of normal release schedule in terms of something we can actually do properly. So just learning what I'd learned in terms of the processes of working on Dark Heresy and the various other kind of warm fancy books and stuff that I did worked on in Black Industries all kind of helped to kind of ground my knowledge in terms of how a book gets made, but also how a rule book gets made, because that's a different thing in the game. Just things like how to index better, what's the best way of indexing a book, what do you index? How do you do internal referencing? How do you ensure consistency through a text, particularly a rule book? Because obviously rule books, it's important to make them clear and understandable so people can learn the rules easily and not have to have a maths degree to learn how to play a game. So
Traveler.
all these things,
Traveler.
So all these things build on one another, and my kind of gaming career in that sense is always been about trying to making the next book better than the last book. And that's not just in terms of what it is, in terms of the scenarios better or the content, but making sure there's less errors, making sure the artwork's better, making sure it looks better, it feels better, that it's consistent, how the language works is better. And so it's a continual, and it's still to this day, my job is to try and get it better every time. And it's an ongoing process because no book is ever finished.
No, it's just abandoned.
You just have to call it quits at a certain point when then the layout department are knocking on your door saying, give us a book to lay out. You have to kind of go, here you go then, and you've got to kind of get it to the best of your ability to there. So yeah, you learn loads of things. I mean, and there's so much outside of the games industry that I've learned that I bring back in. I worked for a long time in events. I worked for a long time in kind of marketing and promotions and writing advert copy and instructional brochures and non-fiction and all this kind of stuff, which has all helped me in the long run, just being a better writer, being a better project manager, being someone who can work with lots of different components and juggle lots of plates to produce the end result. Because ultimately that when you are there's a, as you'll know, Ross, it's a world away from just being a writer. If you're actually also the line editor or the creative director or whatever it is you're being, you that's only one bit of your job. You've got all these other plates you're trying to spin.
Yeah.
And the idea is you're trying to get them to all spin at the same speed and all fall off at the same time into this small box that then says, here you go, you can now take that and make a book out of it. And so yeah, it's a constant learning process, and it never ends.
You and I have a lot in common, including starting out as marketing writers. I was when I was at Games Workshop, I was in fact an editor for marketing and did a lot of writing of brochures and crap, just like you. So
sure. Yeah,
we got a super chat from Azure Shadow 88. Thank you much, Azure Shadow. He says, if Wifrip is Gotrek and Felix, is Dark Heresy Eisenhorn? Question mark.
Yeah,
yes.
pretty much.
Yeah. The icon.
Yeah, I mean, there's really easy answers. Yes. I mean, Dan Abnett's Eisenhorn books were required reading, really. And I always wanted to play Ravener, though. I just wanted this guy who just goes around in this big egg and doesn't ever do anything. Well, that'd be great. What are you doing? I'm just sitting here. What are you gonna do now? I'm just gonna stay sat here. Then my mind, what can I say with my psychic thoughts? That's but that might the joke might get old quickly, but I thought that would be kind of fun.
So fun fact, the Kixis sector is actually right next to the Scarus sector, which is where Eisenhorn's adventures take place. And Mike can tell me more about this, but my understanding is that Abnett was involved with the creation of the Kixis sector as well.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it was actually before. It was what Kate and Owen worked with Dan more closely than I did. It was kind of done by the time I arrived. But we had a kind of we had the Kixis sector kind of the idea, and we had, I don't know, maybe 40% of it mapped out in terms of what the planets are called and where they were. And then I was working with Andy Law, who was our cartographer, who is the guy who actually produced the map in the book, which is that one.
It's so good, so good.
Nice,
You
beautiful.
can't see it too much here, but you can see if you zoom in a bit, you've got every planet is named, and so, as I say, a lot of the planets already had names, but there was plenty more that didn't have names. So again, somebody had to sit there and think of names for planets. And I remember working with my colleagues John French and Alan Bly to kind of come up with planet names and to make them sound authentically 40k, but also trying to inject a bit of mystery into them. Oh, that sounds that planet sounds cool. What would that inspire me to think could be going on there? That kind of thing. So, and then there was a whole the big kind of unnamed conspiracy about the Kixis, etc., about the what's it called, the
Tyrant Star.
The Tyrant Star. Thank you. So with this whole Tyrant Star, we had big conversations about what's the Tyrant Star, and we go, we have no idea, but we'll work it out. and so throughout a lot of the original Dark Heresy books, it's mentioned this Tyrant Star about it. It's foretold that it will come, and it's bad news, and so we were just layering in all this foreshadowing that our original plan would be that we would start to layer more in through the books till we finally revealed what it was and the effect it would have on the game and so forth. But of course, that never really completely happened in the way that we wanted it to. But obviously, it did continue into some of the later books that Fantasy Flight did. This
is from the Owlcat CRPG Dark Heresy coming out soon this year. So
yeah, so I mean, there you go. I mean, it was a lovely idea, because it was one of those kind of things. If you wanted to design, you at home wanted to design what you wanted the Tyrant Star to be in your game, you could. There was no rules. It was it was just ideas, which was kind of fun.
Vera, would you like to read this super chat?
Yes, please. Thank you, Ricky Chapman. Who gives us a tip for the Call of Cthulhu, suggestion for PCs. Buy the buildings and property where the horror was. With how much blood and body parts are in there, they are typically quite cheap. Fighting the mythos is expensive, so getting into real estate can help. You can turn over some property to
that's
a quick profit.
That's brilliant. I love it.
Great potential there for Call of Cthulhu adventurers, because you find out that this the apartment has a gate to the hell dimension or whatever it is, and it can never be closed. It will always exist. No matter what, you can't close it, but you can kind of hold the things back, but you have to. Someone's got to always be there to guard it, and so the players find this, and in finding it, they actually inadvertently kill the guardian of the gate, and realize that now they're default guardians of the gate. They can't leave. That's the horror. And so so they better buy the property and maybe try and rent out the other rooms, and then they can kind of be like the the supers in the building, dealing with these little infestations from this hell dimension around the building. And there's a whole campaign there you've just designed.
That's where you get that high rise at Ghostbusters.
Exactly. There you go.
That's fantastic.
And we got one more from Blazhue, who says, "Thanks, Lorebeards. Started my Enemy in Shadows campaign last week." I think he means The Enemy Within. First time running Wifrup. You're always great inspiration. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks so much.
And I think
my heart.
And Mike, of course, is that's also for you. You have inspired someone. You inspired many people.
Very kind.
If it's okay, I'd like to just briefly kind of go over some of the things that I picked up in my research about the earliest days of Dark Heresy, which was Kate Flack, who was the RPG brand manager at Black Industries from 2004 to 2007. And she had been overseeing, as you mentioned, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, which had been designed with Green Ronin. Owen Barnes was one of her collaborators who started as a mail order worker and then got his foot in the door writing for Black Industries. Owen did a whole lot of writing for me, by the way, on Dark Heresy, Rogue Trader, and Deathwatch. Owen's fantastic. Love him. And also Rob Schwab of Shadow of the Demon Lord and the lead designer for Dungeons and Dragons 4th edition, was also involved at this point, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, no, Rob wrote Shattered Hope, which was the very first Dark Heresy scenario, because it was part of our promotion that we gave the scenario away for free as a little booklet at various Games Workshop events, and Rob did wrote that scenario. So yeah, it was nice working with Rob back then. Yeah.
And so this takes us up to the big announcement, the 2006 announcement, which was huge. It was earth-shaking. I remember it was all over the internet. I was sitting at home in Maryland, where I was living at the time, and I was like, oh my God, they're doing it. They're actually doing it. It was a seismic shock. Vera, were you around in 2006 on the internet?
I was a tiny baby. I was not yet using the computer unsupervised.
Well, I can tell you it was big. It was a big thing. And that is when we get this early draft of the book. And I have seen this draft, Mike, and I agree with you 150%. What was in this draft was not 40K. And I can only describe it to the listeners out there. But it had kind of a strong, to me, it felt a little bit like Shadowrun. Like the fiction had an inquisitor going into a bar with like this really loud music. It was like orc music or something like that. And I was like, what is this? And the career system was based on Whiffer 2nd edition. So you had all these little bitty careers, stuff like astronauts and land speeder pilots. And I was like, no, you would not want to be an astronaut in 40K. No, not in any way, shape, or form.
A void ship enthusiast. Local warp fan.
Indeed. Yeah, no, that's absolutely, yeah. It was kind of, in and of itself, if it wasn't anything to do with 40K, I'm sure it would have been a fine sci-fi style of game. It just didn't have the 40K flavor. That's the thing.
It definitely did not. And I want to say, I think some of the elements of that draft ended up in Song and Ice of Fire roleplay, but I would have to talk to Rob Schwab to corroborate that. But that's my suspicion anyway.
Sure. No, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Now, you, Mike, you started in 2001, if I'm not mistaken, as a UK events manager. You were
I was brought in. I came and joined Games Workshop to basically they hadn't really had an events manager before, in terms of somebody who would strategically look at Games Workshop events and redesign them basically, and take responsibility for kind of redesigning the big UK Games Day back in the day, which was the largest event Games Workshop did back then. So yeah, I was brought in to write a 5-year strategy for Games Workshop events. So I did that, and then my role kind of expanded into managing Games Workshop's community relations in the UK. So I kind of became an events and community manager, basically head of events and community. And so I worked what we would call in the sales division of Games Workshop. So working very closely with the stores and with our trade accounts and with the school clubs and all that kind of thing. Yeah, the opportunity came up that, as you say, Kate and Owen decided to move on. Owen was kind of freelance, so Kate decided to move on, and they needed somebody full time to basically, continue on what Kate had started, and so that's when I kind of came in, and as you did, I worked closely with Owen on a lot of projects, which was good fun, and kind of jumped into the kind of design creative side from the sales side, really. But I mean, as I said, my background had always been on the design side, because that's what I've been doing. That was my hobby. That was, designing Call of Cthulhu scenarios and other role-playing stuff, and doing fanzines and running events and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very natural kind of progression for me, I guess, at the time. So
if you're curious, Mike Mason's fanzine for Call of Cthulhu is called The Whisperer, and you can check that out. I don't know where it's available, but I'm sure people who want to find
it. It's not available anymore.
Well,
so the Whisper was made kind of in the very early days of the internet, and so this was before PDFs were even invented. So it was a hard copy, physical fanzine in kind of large format, and there were one issue a year. I did over 5 years, so there are 5 issues of it out there, and they're reasonably hard to find these days because, as I say, there was never a PDF, so you can't get it electronically. It's one of those old school things, but it's packed full of wonderful Call of Cthulhu material from back in the day. So collectors out there, have some copies, but there's not that many out there.
So my research tells me Kate Flack, she left to join EA Mythic, working on Warhammer Online: Age of Reckoning.
That's right. Yeah.
And my research also shows that around 2006, Games Workshop had a pretty big round of staff cuts. The Lord of the Rings bubble had kind of burst, and so a lot of people were kind of made redundant. But this is when Mark Gascon, who was the head of Black Library, right? Yeah. He got in touch with you about Dark Heresy, and he was like, "Hey, you have done this fanzine, The Whisperer. You know role-playing games really well," and that's how they got.
I mean, it wasn't quite like that, but but close. But I mean, basically, there was an internal vacancy for the head of Black Industries. So I applied. I mean, other people I knew applied. I applied, but because of the things you mentioned that I'd done previously, Marco knew that, and basically turned around and said, "Well, you got the job because you've done it before. You've done, you've proven you are the kind of person that would do this kind of job, basically." So I did apply and I got the job, fortunately. And Marco was great to work with. He let me get on and learn by making lots of mistakes, but I did learn, and it was great working with Marco. And obviously he's got a very colourful history in terms of varied history working with Games Workshop from
legendary
year dot. Mark was involved in working on the Judge Dredd role-playing game and the first edition, the first UK edition of Call of Cthulhu that Games Workshop did, and all these kind of illustrious kind of career, not only in role-playing games, but obviously in fiction publishing as well, and continues to this day. I think Marco's still working on games with Ian Livingston, the guy one of the founders of Games Workshop, and the whole kind of
and creator of Lara Croft.
Yeah. So I mean, it was Marco was a font of knowledge that
I think
significantly
isn't it? I think Ian Livingston is the creator of Lara Croft, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, it's only his company did. IDOS software.
Yeah. So Games Workshop has a lot of connections to a lot of things in all of gaming history. It's one of these days we'll do an episode on the history of Games Workshop, and it'll be a lot of fun.
That sounds like a blast.
So
Mike, spider web
oh yeah, it's such a web. So Mike, you were brought in, and this is your baptism by fire because you have only a few months. The announcement was for 2006, but it was never going to come out in 2006. It was going to come out in 2008, and some of my research here, I'm going to ask you questions about it because I'm not sure. Like some of this stuff is a little wild. It suggests that there were vehicle rules that had to be cut.
Yes. You've reminded, many things I've forgotten, but you've just reminded me. So there was a whole section on vehicles that I just couldn't fit in the book. So I ended up making that available for free on the internet. I made that available on the Dark Heresy website that we obviously had at GW. And so that was that, and a couple of other things I made them available as free downloads because I just couldn't fit them in the rule book. So
At what point did you? So I guess I'm curious. It seems like from the draft that I saw that Dark Heresy was always kind of a narrow look at 40K, that it was always sort of about the Inquisition and people working with the Inquisition and not about Space Marines and Eldar and all the other stuff.
That's right. It was very, very focused because the original plan had always been there would be 3 games. There would be 3 kind of subsequent games. There would be Dark Heresy, which would be focusing on the Inquisition. and playing kind of human agents of the Inquisition. Then there would be Rogue Trader, where you would be playing basically spaceships and trading and traveling through space and dealing with aliens and whatnot. And then there would be I can't remember, was it called Death Watch? I think it was Death Watch.
Yeah.
Which would basically allow you to kind of play Space Marines in the kind of the universe we'd created for the role playing game. So you got the Inquisition, Rogue Traders, and then Death Watch Marines, and their operatives and supporters kind of thing. And that was the 3-book plan that originally Black Industries was going to do. And obviously, when Black Industries sort of ceased to function on just after the release of Dark Heresy, that plan kind of became the foundation kind of plan for Fantasy Flight. But obviously, as you know, that was then developed by you, and then you took it in different directions and did other things as well. So yeah.
Well, I know that the big reveal at December 2007, it's called 6 Minutes of Glory. Because the limited collector's edition went on sale and it was sold out in 6 minutes. 200 copies.
200 copies, so out of 30,000 pre-orders.
So the rush to purchase was so intense, it kind of became something of a, well, there's reports that some of the books were damaged and that some of the shipments were lost, and some of the people who bought those collector's editions were eBay scalpers. That's at least from my research, but
right, okay, yeah.
But it sold out 6 minutes, which is huge. And then we get to January of 2008, January 25th. Let's be very clear. The specific date, January 25th, 2008. And this is when the regular edition came out and sold out almost immediately.
Yeah. It was
and then go ahead, please.
No, it was very successful. We basically wrote the book and then we sold every copy we printed before the release date. So to distribution and so forth. So it was available in game stores. It wasn't sold out in that sense, but we'd sold, our actual GW copies, as it were, to distribution or to pre-sales. So in terms of us, we made our money basically, and then it was obviously into retail to sell thereon. But obviously it got snapped up pretty quickly in retail too. So very quickly, it was kind of out of print really.
So imagine yourself sitting in front of the computer, January 25th, 2008, going, oh my God, it's out. I can't wait to get a copy. Oh, it's sold out. Okay, well, I'll wait for the second printing, right? Me and millions of other people who wanted to play Dark Heresy, you're like, well, we'll just wait. It's fine. It'll be fine. This sold out. It's huge. It's a big success. There's no way that this could possibly go wrong. And then 2 days later, January 28th, 2008, Games Workshop was like, hey, we are shutting down Black Industries. And Disciples of the Dark Gods, which was a book in progress, would be the final product, which of course it would not be the final product. The final product was actually Inquisitor's Handbook.
Yeah.
So the timing is staggering. It's a game that sold out in days, the culmination of 18 years of fan demand, canceled by its own publisher before the ink on the first print run is dry.
It's crazy. It's a crazy time.
Oh my God. Shock. The if I could describe the reaction in 2 words, it was shock and fury. People were just like, what? How could you? What is this? Of course, in that era of Games Workshop, PR disasters were fairly common. I would say. So it wasn't like really surprising, but it was fairly surprising. It was shocking. It certainly sounded like high-level corporate people imposing cost-cutting measures, and their strategy would just be slash everything to drive up profits for short-term.
I don't think it was cost-cutting. That wasn't the issue. The issue in the Games Workshop was very simple. Games Workshop's main business was making toy soldiers, and what supported toy soldiers was Warhammer Fantasy Battle and Warhammer 40,000, the tabletop war game. They help sell miniatures, and what we were doing didn't sell miniatures. So in terms of the board, in that sense, the management board, the management team, it was basically decided that we were not core business. So we weren't doing anything that supported the core business, because the core business was making toy soldiers. And as you well know, a role-playing game, while you can use miniatures, and we encourage people to do so, you don't need many miniatures. Whereas if you play Warhammer Fantasy Battle, you need a lot of miniatures.
I'll note this is an ongoing industry issue. Like Wizards of the Coast, they make very little off D&D because you don't need minis for it. You need one person in a group of 5 or 6 to have a book. And it is something they've tried to get around with the online services and things, but it is a challenge. So
no, it wasn't core business. So the decision was anything that distracted from core business was a risk, and therefore that was a distraction. Therefore, it was decided to close it down and to basically license the properties to somebody else to do, which, you know, in a sense is not a bad business decision. But it's an annoying and frustrating one for the players and the fans. So
I would like to point out 2 things only about this, is that the half-year period prior to the announcement, Games Workshop posted a loss of £192,000. So that was the end of the Lord of the Rings bubble, and all of the games that were cut, Dark Heresy, Talisman, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, they were demonstrably successful releases. They were money makers, and that's why people were looking at these 2 events going,
Yeah, and that's why that's why at the time it didn't really make much sense, because you're quite right. It seemed to me that the things that were making money were being let go, but it's all scales of economies. It's all, you know, the although they made a loss, they still wanted a lot of money. They were still making a lot of money and potentially could make more money. I mean, look at them now. I mean, it certainly Games Workshop share price then and now compare. No one would say they made a bad decision back then because of where they are now. It's you know, they've proven that they know what they're doing, I guess, in terms of creating a market for their product. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, some of us went through the mill of that.
Vera, would you like to read this one?
Yeah, Skylar notes the classic GW. What do you mean something other than sculpted plastic makes money? I don't believe you. Behind the shed with it. A fly on the wall.
Well, I can tell you from my experience working on Warhammer 40K roleplay, is it was kind of a headache for Games Workshop licensing to deal with, because we would be sending them 400-page books chock full of details, very detailed, intimate level connection to the lore, right? And these guys would have to spend so much time on, frankly, a product line that didn't make nearly as much money as anything else they would be in charge of. Yeah. It was the most effort for the least profit was role-playing games for the licensing team. And that's, I don't know if you experienced anything related to that at all, but I would like to point out, you mentioned John French and Alan Bly earlier, and those guys are superstars. They wrote a bunch of stuff for me as well. And I did speak to them very briefly about the adventure in the back of the Dark Heresy book, because they are the ones who wrote it. Would you like to share some light on that, Mike?
Well, the idea was that it basically would be the kind of the run into what was going to be, or what did become the Harlock legacy, and this whole kind of idea of this campaign based out of this kind of if I remember correctly, a rogue trader or some kind of, you know, Harlock was, and clearly he'd been up to bad things in his life, and he's left this trail of this strangeness, and there's a kind of mystery around him and his death and so forth. And so they kind of sowed a load of seeds into that initial adventure, but then the idea would be that would then pay off later when they did a whole kind of trilogy of Harlock adventures. So that was the initial instigation. However, there's all sorts in that adventure that have got that are just callbacks and Easter eggs from me, because Alan knew that I was good friends with Alan and John. Still am with John. Obviously, Alan passed a few years ago, unfortunately. But me and Alan and John were big fans of horror fiction and films and monster movies. And there's a if I remember correctly in the scenario, there's a tomb that when it's opened, these kind of pale humanoids can come out and cause all sorts of mischief. If I remember correctly, if I'm trying to remember correctly, because that was based directly on a horror story that by a guy called T.E.D. Klein and called The Children of the Kingdom, which there's a lot of these kind of things living underground and they come out. And that was one of my favorite stories. And so Alan kind of put a nod to that in that scenario. So there's all these little kind of Easter eggs in there that are kind of fun stuff to kind of bring out if you can find the references.
Well, yeah, I think Alan and John also didn't they also write one of the adventures? I want to say it's Edge of Darkness.
So Alan. So I wanted another adventure that because Shattered Hope, the one that Rob Schwab had written, was given away free, but we didn't really have anything else. And I needed something that we could run at conventions, and we could also show another side to the game, a much more kind of horror side. Because I think Shadow tended to deal more kind of with the kind of Xenos kind of alien kind of threat with a touch of chaos. It wasn't very horror orientated a scenario. Whereas I told Alan, I want a horror scenario. I want a horror film that's Rogue Trader. So he went off and wrote Edge of Darkness, and which is full of horrible images and nasty things. So Alan went away and wrote that for me, so we had something else to kind of put out there as something for people to play while we were still working on the scenario book Purge the Unclean and so forth. The three of us would just get together and idea jam and just come up with ideas and things that we wanted to do, and so we worked very closely together, because the guys kind of saved my bacon with Disciples of the Dark Gods, because the original writing team had produced a book that we didn't. Well, we all looked at it very closely and decided that it wasn't publishable. It wasn't appropriate for what we wanted for the game. So I had very little time to produce a new book, and Alan and John heroically stepped forward and produced a book out of thin air, literally, in the space of 2 months, and on top of their day jobs.
So Disciples of
the Dark Gods is that book, and certainly obviously it went through a bit of a development phase with Fancy Flight, because obviously Black Industries never got to actually publish it. It became the first kind of Fancy Flight book, really. And so but that came out of a very last minute kind of situation that we just needed to fix, basically.
And Disciples, go ahead.
Had that in the handbook both been in the works before you came on then?
Yeah. So they had been in development, but then they kind of came in while I was there, so I was editing them to kind of get them into ready for print and publication. So I worked with T.S. Lucar on the stuff he did for Purge the Unclean, and obviously Alan and John on Disciples of the Dark Gods, and obviously those guys, as well as a few others who had contributed things for the Inquisitor's Handbook, which was the kind of that came out early as well. So it was quite a small team. There was a small team of as in GW who were kind of working together, but also there was a number of freelancers outside, like T.S. Lucar and so on, who who were contributing as well and helping to kind of get things done. Really,
let's talk for a minute about legacy. So John French, Alan Bly, they wrote, not only did they write Edge Darkness, not only did they write the adventure in the core rulebook, they also wrote the adventure in the Game Master screen called Maggots in the Meats, which is awesome, by the way, and very Call of Cthulhu. If you really want Call of Cthulhu in 40K, check out Maggots in the Meat. They wrote Disciples of the Dark Gods, which I will say is probably the best Dark Heresy source book, period.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's astounding, that book. Yeah.
Now those guys went on to do Alan Bly especially went on to write all the Horus Heresy rule books, which fleshed out a whole lot about the Horus Heresy, which is awesome. And John would write a bunch of Black Library novels and end up as head of licensing for a while. So those two guys went on to do a lot of really big, important things for Games Workshop after working on Dark Heresy.
And when I started at Chaosium working on Call of Cthulhu, those guys came along and helped me there as well, and they produced some really great material. In fact, still do. John is actually working on Call of Cthulhu material for me at the moment, and Alan wrote one of the most popular Call of Cthulhu scenarios ever done, which is called Deadlight, and that's still available to this day. And also, Alan wrote one of the scenarios in the back of the current Call of Cthulhu rulebook called Crimson Letters. And again, a very popular scenario. So Alan's contribution and John's indeed continues on from Dark Heresy. It's a direct line into Call of Cthulhu working with me as well. Yeah.
One of the things I regret is not being able to talk to you specifically before starting my job at Fantasy Flight. It sure would have been nice to have a long sit down. And I wish that
would have been cool. I guess because I mean, obviously, FFG had my details. They could have got in touch. I guess they didn't think to sort of say to you, "Hey, here's Mike's email. Why don't you drop him a line?" I don't know, but never mind.
So Vera, what do you have any questions about this development period?
Oh, tons. Like I could see a lineage between a Disciple and the Dark Gods and like Call of Cthulhu for sure. There's a lot of grotesque cult behavior in there, some incredible stuff. I'm curious to know like how you wanted to center the IP in these though, because I know that part of the pass was to try and bring in the emphasis on like different elements of the Warhammer property and make it feel more 40K-ish. But there's a very dark thread of that throughout these this book especially. I was just curious, like, what the guiding light of darkness was, I suppose.
It was a fine line because obviously we wanted it to feel 40K, but we also wanted it to. It is a horror game. At the end of the day, Rogue Trader is like Call of Cthulhu, a horror mystery game. It just, that's one's a sci-fi game, one's set in the kind of the world we live in, and so it was very much. We were building off horror cues from the wealth of kind of horror media that come before that. As I say, myself, Alan, and John particularly were great fans of, and we would look for inspiration from the past in that sense. So there was definitely a strong horror vibe through our Dark Heresy work. However, it was also meant to be. Not meant to be so dark as to be, I don't know, unapproachable and something that you wouldn't want, young Susan and Johnny reading. It needed to be accessible and horror done in the right way rather than really, really nasty bad stuff. So it was trying to making sure there's a balance and making sure that it was, as you might call it, safe horror. In a sense that it's not going to offend people, but people can get a kind of a frisson of horror from it, and connecting it all back to 40K. Because at the end of the day, 40K is a game played by people aged 8 to 80 plus. So, and that's a broad church of people and types, and so making something that it would be, I can't remember if we put mature No, no, we didn't. We didn't. There was no mature warning or trigger warning on the Dark Heresy books because we knew 12 and 13-year-olds would want to play them, just like we wanted to do at 12 and 13, playing 40k and all that kind of stuff. You know, we knew in ourselves that, you know, if we'd have been 13 when Dark Heresy came out, we would have wanted to buy it and play it because that would have been right up our street. So we had to kind of have a balance. There had to be kind of a sense check to the kind of the level of horror in it and the kind of graphic nature of horror. But horror's a very broad thing. You know, you got like young adult horror fiction to very grim films and stuff, and all points in between. You know, horror means many different things to many different people, and so trying to find the appropriate level is always an important thing in certainly in role-playing games. So ensuring that your audience understands the level of game this is and who it's appropriate for, basically.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because for anyone unfamiliar with the House of Dust and Ash, it sort of opens with a deliberately disquieting, off-tempo, out of the norm meeting, and proceeds to these sort of spooky scenarios, lots of scary masks and so on. But it's done this disquieting way, and that makes sense as the ethos for it.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
One more thing about Legacy I'd like to point out is you mentioned T.S. Lukert had worked with you on Dark Heresy. Of course, T.S. Lukert is one of the lead designers on the Imperium Maledictum game, which is a spiritual successor in a lot of ways to Dark Heresy. So that legacy continues almost 20 years later.
It's funny, you know, you get on the authors lists and the contributor lists of some of the Dark Heresy books, and as you say, that there's a lot of people who are still working today in different pockets of the gaming industry doing their thing. And, you know, and a lot of them tend to, as you know, as I mentioned with John and Alan, they worked on Dark Heresy on a number of publications. They still worked on some Cthulhu stuff as well. And the same for other authors like TS and so forth, who are, you know, continuing to kind of, you know, develop and contribute towards, you know, the gaming, whether it's within the 40k universe or beyond. You know, it's great to see people who have had their starts or early work in stuff we did 20 years ago, who are still, you know, plugging away and doing cool stuff, you know, building on that and producing cool games. Ultimately, is what it's all about.
I have a quick question about the Inquisitor's Handbook.
Yeah.
The rumor is, or at least what I've heard through the grapevine, is that the Inquisitor's Handbook was basically things that you just couldn't fit into the core. It is kind of a grab bag of material that just could not fit into the core book, and was like, okay, well, what are we going to do with it? Well, let's publish it as a player book, and we'll put all that material all together in one spot.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair summation to some degree. We wanted a book that, you know, gave players more cool things, more toys. So, you know, the fact putting the Adeptus Sororitas in the core book didn't kind of feel right. It felt too niche, but putting it into the Inquisitor's Handbook felt right because it kind of felt that it was an optional expansion. And so there were all that kind of stuff. I'm having a look, reminding myself what's in the book now. But yeah, advanced character creation, that could have gone in the core book, but it's that additional layers of optional stuff that isn't really necessary. It's nice to have, but it's not essential. So, you know, when I talked about making rule books clear and concise, that also means cutting out a lot of the waffle, which is good stuff, but it can kind of get in the way of your core rules. So putting that in a book like the Inquisitor's Handbook, where people are coming to it with a knowledge of the game already, they can then decide whether these kind of optional extras are going to suit their gaming style and the games that they want to do. So it kind of works that way. And it again allowed us to kind of expand on the setting, get a bit more insight, particularly for players, on the 40k setting. Because again, we were dealing with areas of 40k that nobody really knew about. Certainly the players didn't know about. So being able to give them a book that they could take away and read and learn about the setting and just get into it and become kind of engaged with, meant that was a great way for them to kind of feel more engaged with the game and want to play and do, use some of the cool option things in here in their game. So it's a way of exciting players and pulling them in deeper into the game and the lore. Whereas if it had all been in the rule book, the players probably won't access that because the GM was the one who buys the rule book, and the players don't tend to buy the rule book in the same way. But making a book very player facing meant that any player could buy it if they wanted to, they wouldn't get into trouble with their GM for buying things with secrets and all that kind of stuff.
Would you like to hear a funny story about the Inquisitor's Handbook?
Yeah, sure.
So when I'm working on Rogue Trader, which is my first core rulebook for Warhammer 40K roleplay, it's only about 6 months after I started at Fantasy Flight, and I was still kind of figuring out like how many words would fit into a book sometimes, and especially with localization, when you're talking about German, the words get really long. So we commissioned a lot of material for Rogue Trader, like a lot. And when I started doing the layout on the book, I was like, there is no way we're going to be able to fit all of this material into the core book. What are we going to do with it? And I thought about it for about 10 seconds, and I looked over and I saw the Inquisitor's Handbook. I said, aha, here's what we'll do. We'll take all the material that can't fit in there. And we made this product, which is Into the Storm.
Oh yes, yeah.
Which is the Inquisitor's Handbook for Rogue Trader.
Yeah,
and this tradition carried on because in Deathwatch and Only War, we also had a player's book that was basically.
I think it's good. I think player facing books are great. I think they players often want something. They want something that they can read, and they want something they can put bells and whistles on their character and stuff that's cool. And so hiding that all away in a GM book isn't always a good thing. You want something the players can get excited about, something for them, basically. So I think it's a good tradition to have continued, Ross, definitely.
Yeah, even recently in 4A, we did a book for Cthulhu where we had a player book full of new options and character classes for the High Elves and so on.
Well, player books are always a good sell because you have several players in each group, and they are probably going to buy it. So
they want to see the new toys. Like, hey, there's cool stuff in there.
So I'm curious if are there any stories you would like to tell us about the development of Purge the Unclean?
There's not really much. I mean, it's a bit of a whirlwind, that one, because I think because I was so busy on everything else, I think I put a lot of I gave Owen a lot of time to actually do a kind of an editorial pass on that product. So he did all the kind of heavy lifting, really, and then I just kind of then did a final edit on his edit, basically, to get it ready for publication. So he's the one who really did the most on that book rather than me. So I don't really have a great deal to remember. I mean, I just remember it being a series of really crazy scenarios. Like, there's a whole zombie invasion in one, isn't there? There's the mining planet, and then basically it's Dawn of the Dead. It's literally, and it just made me laugh because when I was first time I read it, I'm just going, well, this is Dawn of the Dead. Oh, it is Dawn of the Dead. This is great. This is funny. It's so funny. And that's what I mean about these kind of adventures being really cool because, hopefully the players at some point just suddenly realize they're in the middle of a zombie invasion, and it's like, oh my god, this is a lot of fun. So I just kind of remember those kind of things. I'm struggling to remember the last scenario, what it was about, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
Barren Hopes, and it's about mutants in a mine.
Oh, yes,
right?
yes.
Without...
Now, yeah. It all comes flooding back.
I read all of those books. Obviously, one of my first things I did at Fantasy Flight was I read everything multiple times. But yeah, that's what's astounding to me, Mike, is just that the story of the development of Dark Heresy is one of the most dramatic in all of RPG history.
Yeah.
It's got 20 years of fan demand, designed by a tiny team under immense pressure, delayed by over a year, launched to instant commercial success, and then orphaned by its own company within 48 hours of release.
It's certainly, as you say, it's certainly a bit of gaming history and lore there, isn't it? and it's interesting for me to kind of be the person who's in the middle of all of that. It's certainly interesting because I mean, because I mean I was out of a job. I mean I got made redundant from Games Workshop when that Black Industries finished because there was no job for me left to do. So and then there was all sorts of things, possibilities. I was talking to Fancy Flight about potentially would I be interested in taking getting a job there and moving from the UK to Minneapolis. No, I didn't want to do that. I got young children in the UK. It wasn't something I was interested in doing to move at that time. So that was kind of off the table.
Thank you for turning that down.
I paved the way for you, Ross, which was a good outcome. So but then as you all know, there's certainly back then. I mean, it's slightly different now, but even now it's still hard enough. There aren't that many jobs in game design. There aren't many jobs, and if there are, a lot of them are freelance. Most of them are freelance. There's not many actual paid salary full-time roles in games companies, full stop. And certainly even less for writers and game designers. So certainly at the time there wasn't much going at all. So I ended up not working in the games industry for some years and doing what I would call a real job in the real world, doing things like that. And then but continuing to do stuff freelance, outside of my day job to kind of just keep in and do things and still develop, that kind of side to me. But and that's kind of what led me into co-writing the new edition of Call of Cthulhu. That was a freelance gig, something that kind of came up as an opportunity, and then that led to me being offered the role at Chaosium to come and look after the Cthulhu line, and that's where I've been ever since. But I mean, that wasn't again an advertised job. That was a job I kind of created because of the situation that I kind of arrived in. That's we co-wrote this game, and Chaosium needed someone to now manage the production line edit that game, and I just happened to be the right person at the right time, or available, because I was available to look for work. So it's all happy coincidences and chances how we all end up doing what we do, because I didn't plan to be a games designer when I was 12. I didn't plan when I was 30 to be a games designer. It's like, but by the time I was 40, I was a game designer. It's like I still to this day not quite sure how I got to be one. How it was pure luck in certain cases, but it's been from what you just said, Ross, about the kind of the ending of Black Industries. I mean, it's certainly been a whirlwind roller coaster ride, and certainly lots of interesting times I've been through because of it. So yeah, it's been interesting, but I wouldn't change it because it's been a lot of fun as well, and I've got to work on things I love. I love the 40k universe, I love Call of Cthulhu, and I love horror and mysteries and all that kind of thing. So I've been very fortunate in being able to kind of work in game design on the things I really like. I was never in a position where I had to go and write a game that I wasn't interested in. And so been very fortunate. I guess like you, Ross, you obviously have always had a love for Warhammer, and you were the right guy at the right time. Again, you happen to be the guy there to be able to pick it up and run with it. So that was fortunate. It's very good.
Well, thank you, sir. I do appreciate that. We have, I think, fairly convincingly drawn that through line from Call of Cthulhu influencing Rogue Trader, the first edition of 40k, to Dark Heresy being an expression of Call of Cthulhu, to you leaving Dark Heresy and now working on Call of Cthulhu, and have been
It's
So
a big closed loop. Yeah.
There's a lot of connections there, and not for nothing. 40K turns 40 next year, 2027. Dark Heresy turns 20 in 2028. I would like to plan something with you for 2028. That would be a fun 20-year celebration of Dark Heresy moment. We'll have to talk about that.
Oh yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, we should definitely look to do something on the anniversary. That would be very cool. So yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, and I should point out one last thing for Legacy. On our sister show, Lorebeards 40,000, we actually interviewed Sarah Kaiser. She is a webcomic designer and worked on all of the mobile apps for Games Workshop over several years, did a lot of the comics for Warhammer Community. And her career is a through line that starts with Dark Heresy and ends up with her working directly at Games Workshop.
Oh, brilliant. That's lovely to hear. It's so nice when, again, I mean, obviously I'm most these days well known for Call of Cthulhu, because I've done it a long time, and I've done a lot of books. And so people, if I go to, when I go to conventions and I'm, on the Chaosium stand and I'm talking about the books we're doing and signing books and saying hello to people, which is great, really nice, and I'm very fortunate to be able to do that and to meet people that play the games. But every now and again, very quietly, somebody will wander up with a bag and they'll say, "Would you mind signing a book?" And I go, "Yeah, absolutely, you're very welcome." Expecting them to get out a Call of Cthulhu rule book or something, and then they look a bit sheepish and they pull out, Dark Heresy. I say, "Would you sign my Dark Heresy?" And I go, "Of course." And it's a real thrill, because that's somebody who's had that book probably a long time, and I've been waiting a long time to get that signature. So it's quite nice to be able to say thank you to them, basically, for their long-term support, really, and the fact that they still love the game, or in fact playing the game still. It's great to hear when people are still playing games you've done, even though they're long in the tooth and have been superseded by second editions and all these other things. It's nice to every now and again for someone to say, "Oh, we got out your old game and we gave it a go. It was good fun, but we've gone back to our normal game now. But it was great for a night to do your old game." And that's great to hear. It's like it still keeps it alive, doesn't it?
Mm. So Vera, I know you have some questions for Mike, either about Dark Heresy or Call of Cthulhu. What would you like to talk to him about?
I had a question about another thorough line, possibly. So the Whisperer, this might be a stretch, but it happens to share its name with a pulp magazine from, I believe, the 30s or 40s. There's an ultra-violent action series. And I know that you were the lead on the Pulp Cthulhu book as well. And I'm wondering if the pulp action genre of fiction might have been an influence on your interests.
It certainly was a bit of an influence, but it wasn't the main influence. The Whisperer was actually directly relates to a Lovecraft story called The Whisper in Darkness, where you've got this guy who's really an alien in disguise, whispering all these secrets to the main guy in the story. So that's really where the name came from. But yeah, subconsciously, I think also there is a bit of that, what you were talking about, that kind of action pulp stuff. I was always, I wasn't alive back in the 30s when pulp was a thing, but I grew up in the early mid 1970s, when there was still quite a lot of horror comics, and quite pretty gratuitous horror comics, very very scary ones, real blood and guts kind of stuff, and that certainly shaped me, and so that kind of horror pulp stuff definitely kind of shaped my interest in horror and all of that. When that definitely is a through line into the Pulp Cthulhu book, where you're dealing with kind of slightly larger than life player characters with dastardly villains and alien monsters with 200 foot high and robots and all that kind of stuff. So definitely that kind of influence there as well.
When you put it that way, it sounds a little bit like Dark Heresy, actually.
It all comes back. It always comes back to this.
Interesting. And we were talking about sword and sorcery stuff a little bit before stream, and I see that as kind of connected to the pulp scene and that energy.
Strong connections between pulp and sword and sorcery. But sword and sorcery, oddly enough, is one of those things now where if you try to explain heavy metal to someone and all of the 800 different subgroups of heavy metal, sword and sorcery is like that now. Sword and sorcery, you say sword and sorcery, and they're like, oh, but do you mean Robert E. Howard, or do you mean this, or do you mean that? You know, and there's like all these subdivisions of sword and sorcery now, which is hilarious to me.
This is where we reference Michael Moorcock, I think.
Oh, we need
Yeah,
to,
this is the
we need
spot.
to reference Michael Moorcock. We always at least once per show. So how excited are you for Dark Heresy to be a computer game that is coming out this year?
Yeah, very excited. I think, it's I don't play a lot of computer games these days. I mean, I still play every now and again, but I just don't have the time that when you're young, you're all this time in the world. I don't have quite as much time as I used to kind of play that. I mean, I used to, sit and play Half-Life for hours on end, and then Half-Life 2, and then The Last of Us, and all these kind of great classics. But it's nice to be able to dip in and out of stuff, and especially newer games. Obviously, a quantum leap from some of those old games I mentioned in terms of just the way they play and the look and so forth. But yeah, no, I'm interested and very interested to have a look at it and hopefully give it a go. I mean, what's scary though is you dip your toe in the water with a game like a computer game version of Dark Heresy, and you go, I'll just play for half an hour and get a feel for it. And then, 6 days later, you're still playing it. That's the danger.
Well, I for one am very curious to see what they decide to do with the Tyrant Star, because it clearly is going to play a major role, and whether or not John and Alan's idea is going to be the thing, or whether they're going to go with one of the other interpretations. I'm fascinated to find out.
Yeah, no, that genuinely would be interesting to see where they go with that. Yeah, and I guess both. I guess at this point, we can say both myself and Ross are available to developers if they want to, discuss ideas, or then obviously clearly, we'd happily talk about the Tyrant Star till the cows come home. So yeah.
Oh yeah, please, Alcat, if you're out there, you can reach both of us. Just Lorebeards at gmail.com, and I will pass it on to Mike.
There you go. Can't say fairer than that. There you go. I'm sure they've got some cool ideas of their own as well, though. I'm sure.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's definitely to be a centerpiece. It's part of the concept art they've released so far, and if it's anything like the Rogue Trader game, there's going to be DLC for it, just hundreds of hours of content in one run of the thing. So,
yeah, they just released a new DLC for Rogue Trader, which came out last year, 2 years ago, I want to say. And we got a super chat here from Skylar Martin, 4298. Thank you so much, Skylar Martin. He says, you're given a blank check to bring your dream tabletop role-playing game to life. What are you doing?
It's a tough one, isn't it? Because I mean, my favorite role-playing game has always been Call of Cthulhu. Since 1981, when I started playing it, I immediately went, this is my game. This is the game I've been looking for, and that's not changed in nearly 40 plus years. However, there are other games I like and love as well. Slay Industries, for instance, is a great game.
Oh yeah, that's a one we should cover on this channel, Vera.
Yeah. So there's all these other things, but in terms of a game that's not, I mean, that's kind of like it's like we're opening the veil, isn't it? It's like, what's the game that's never been invented that you want to create? I mean, that's a tough one. I mean, depending at different points in my life before these games had been made, I would have said back in the day, maybe, if nobody had yet made a Lord of the Rings role-playing game, I probably would have said that. If somebody hadn't yet made a Dune role-playing game, I might have said that. But they've already been done, so I can't say that now. But there's, I don't know. It's very, very hard to give you a definitive answer on that, because there's so many things it could be. I guess one of the things that's kind of been done in role play, but not really, or certainly not published yet, would be that kind of, the kind of Sleepy Hollow kind of colonial Gothic, for want of a better word, that kind of pumpkins and Halloween New England feel. I'm really interested in. I've always been very interested in that. So something around that would be kind of cool. I like the idea of imagine there's part of me that kind of goes, well, clearly The Exorcist, the role-playing game, would be interesting. I don't think that's been done yet. So that might be interesting to do, The Exorcist role-playing game. But equally, I could say something like The Clangers, which probably means nothing to you guys. Back in the day in England, when there used to be a kids kind of animated children's program about these aliens that lived on the moon, and they were called The Clangers, and it was kids program. That would be a great role-playing game where you're trying to spend the day on the moon and avoid the soup dragon and all the other things going on. I mean, none of this is going to mean anything to you. However, I've hopefully said enough that you can now go on YouTube and look up The Clangers and enjoy 5 minutes of watching some great kids TV.
That sounds wholesome.
There you go. You're gonna love the soup dragon. He's great.
Vera, what would you do?
Ooh, that's tough. I was quite fond of our ninja concept from a little while back. I think.
Ninja
Scroll. Develop. Yeah.
Yeah, we were talking about a game in the style of the Ninja Scroll anime, the original, and just obviously take out some of the more problematic bits, but keep the action, keep the atmosphere, keep the crazy ninja abilities, and do a game. Yeah, the style, the vibes.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. How about you, Ross?
Well, like Mike, if I was going to pick something licensed, I would probably pick Mass Effect, because I love Mass Effect, and it's crying out for a role playing game. To do something more original, I have this pitch that I have worked on a little bit, but the basic idea is that it's a weird pulp game where all of the pulp heroes, Doc Savage, the Shadow, Tarzan, they formed a group and went off to find why the world was becoming weirder. Why are there atomic knights living in subterranean cities? All of a sudden, the world is becoming weirder, and they go off to find the source of what's causing all this weirdness, and they end up losing the battle, and they get turned evil. So now you are the second generation of masked adventurers. Pat Savage, Doc Savage's sister or cousin, I think. Anyway, Pat Savage is like forming this group of new people to either try and redeem these fallen heroes, or to deal with the source of the weirdness, the Crypt Queen that is starting to corrupt the world with her strange powers. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
As a Venture Brothers / Gravity Falls fan, I am immediately sold on this.
I've now thought of the game, actually. Now you're giving me a chance to think about it while you were talking. I now know the game, my dream RPG to design that I would like to do is clearly Scooby-Doo, the role-playing game.
Oh, that's fantastic.
That's the program that started me liking monsters and horror. So that would be a full circle for me. And I would love to design the Scooby-Doo role-playing game, because that would be a lot of fun.
Well, that's
zoinks.
Oh, go on, please.
I was just gonna say zoinks.
Zoinks,
indeed. Zoinks.
Jinkies.
What I like about that especially is this ethos in RPGs: don't split the party. In this book, you've got a whole section, let's split up and look for clues.
Yeah. Why you must split up. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
At least once per session.
Yeah.
I have played in a convention game that was a Scooby-Doo game, which was a lot of fun. I played Fred in that game, and the rules for Fred was Fred will always come up with a plan that doesn't work.
You know what? You kind of sound like Fred. Actually, you can pull that off. Wait a minute, I hear it now.
Okay, Scoob, you and Shaggy, you go check out the basement. Velma, you're gonna check out the attic. Daphne and I are gonna check out the bedroom.
Yeah. And that plan, of course, doesn't work.
Yeah, well, So yeah, I don't know. Listen, we do plan to do an episode on Holy Grails of RPGs at some point, which is the lost RPGs that we should have that we don't.
Of course, yeah.
But
we revisit a few of these then.
Yeah, Vera, what this would be a good time for you to also talk to Mike about anything you've been curious about for Dark Heresy or Call of Cthulhu, especially anything he's working on recently, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good pull. Is there anything that you're currently developing with Chaosium that you're eager to talk about that you can hint at for us?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of things I can tell you about. I mean, it's constant. We're always developing new material for Call of Cthulhu. It's a constant battle in that sense. So we've got the biggest thing I've worked on recently in terms of what's coming out this year. There's two products actually. The first one is our kind of a follow up to the setting guide I did called Arkham, which is also set in the fictional town of Arkham on the Miskatonic River in New England in the 1920s. And so that was a major kind of sandbox setting where you can stage your games with lots of ideas and characters and so on. And so I've done the kind of the companion book to that, which is called Innsmouth, which is, as you mentioned earlier, Innsmouth, where all the where the fish folk live and all the strange, ocean stuff's going on. So that book, I've kind of spent the last year working on that and writing that book, and we've just recently kind of finished putting that together in layout with all the artwork, and there's been a whole suite of new artwork, which is completely mind-blowing and fantastic. So that's the kind of one of the big books I say will be out later this year that I've been working on. The other one that we're literally just kind of finishing up at the moment, and again will be out a little later in the year, all being well, is a book called The Keeper's Companion, which is basically after the game being out for 10 years, we've finally kind of said, well, after 10 years, we've got a few ideas and a few options, and it's a bit like the Inquisitor's Handbook. We've kind of like, this is not stuff that was going to be in the rule book, but stuff we've kind of, in the last 10 years, kind of thought, oh, wouldn't have this been good if we'd have written it then? We could have put that in the rule book. So there's all these kind of cool ideas and options that we've kind of thought about over the last few years that are kind of coming together in this kind of guidebook with new developed rules and options and so on, and some cool adventures as well. So that's another thing that we have kind of worked on, again, with my colleague Paul Fricker, kind of working together on kind of revisiting some of the older rules and reanimating them, as we say.
Herbert West approves.
Exactly that. Yeah. So that's a couple of things, and I'm trying to think what else we've got. We recently did a new edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight, so that's kind of playing Call of Cthulhu in the kind of late Victorian era, and so we've got some new stuff coming out for that as well later in the year. So it's all lots of cool things, and there's a new solo adventure as well where you don't know if you've got no friends or your friends are all away, you can sit and play your own little Call of Cthulhu adventure without anyone else and just have a really good time. So we've got a really cool one that's called Alone Against the Sands,
nice,
which is set in Egypt. So that should be pretty cool as well. So
that's fun. It's a good setting for that because it's sort of about the Cthulhu mythos is a lot of people sitting alone in the dark, spiraling into madness. So that could be you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, you've got the con coming up as well, right?
So we've got so Chaosium now does a number of conventions around the world every year. So there's Chaosium Con US, which is in near to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is coming up in April, I think. I'm not going to be there for that one, but I'll be going to the UK version in slightly later in the year in May, where we've got the UK Chaosium Con. And then there's going to be the Chaosium Con in Poland, and then there's one in New Zealand coming up later. So unfortunately, we don't get to go to all of them. Otherwise, we get no work done because we're always traveling. so we're kind of limiting ourselves to which ones we're going to. So I'll be at the UK one rather than the American one. But some of my good friends and colleagues will be at the American one, and there'll be some great people there running games and stuff. So that's worth checking out. I think tickets are on sale at the moment, actually, for that one. But we've also got we've got our stand and event room at Gen Con this year. So I'll be over for that to meet some people and say hello. And also it's a bi-year. So this year is a show called Necronomicon in Providence, Rhode Island, which is specifically a kind of a Cthulhu con in a sense. It's specifically about weird fiction. You've got like a whole weird fiction side to the convention and a whole gaming side as well. And so fortunately, it's kind of coincides being quite near to Gen Con. So while I'm over for Gen Con, I'm able to also go to that one and do various panels and run games and things at Necronomicon. So I'm looking forward to all of those. So yeah, so that's kind of convention season for me at the moment. Anyway, that's the stuff I'm getting ready for, as it were. Yeah.
So Mike and I are both men of a certain age, and I know our listeners tend to skew a little bit younger. So I think I should point out that Arkham was a Cthulhu thing first before it was a Batman thing. And it's surprising how much Batman has actually taken from Cthulhu, because you just heard Mike talking about Cthulhu by Gaslight, which came out, the first edition came out in 1986. The comic book Gotham by Gaslight came out in 1989. There is a pretty strong through line of Call of Cthulhu to Batman, of all things. And
yeah, and in fact, if you want to really kind of mess with people's heads, when I worked on Dark Heresy, I used to live in a place called Gotham.
We found more connections here. Interesting.
And we've got a great super chat here from our fishman enthusiast himself, Biofoot. He says, who is the most gorgeous great old one?
We read most gorgeous is sexiest, thanks to YouTube. There's nuance to this.
It depends on your outlook, but I mean, I think most people would probably say Shub-Niggurath is the sexiest one, being a kind of fertility type of god, alien goddess. But if you're into chaos, if you're like if you're really a Warhammer at heart kind of person, and you love the chaos gods, then really Azathoth would be your Cthulhu equivalent, who lives at the center of the universe and is the center of the universe and sleeps and has all these eldritch kind of tentacled pipers who play this constant music to keep Azathoth asleep in the center of the universe, because should Azathoth ever wake, it will destroy the universe. So it's very chaotic in that way. So but then you got Cthulhu, and obviously he's like the biggest name out of all of them, got the most recognition, and he's a dead but dreaming, alive but yet dead, under the Pacific Ocean somewhere, ready for the stars to come right, when he will rise up to reclaim this world. And woe betide anyone who's around at that point, because I imagine it won't be a lot of fun when the fishmen take over, basically. So so it depends. If you're into fish, Cthulhu, you're into fertility, alien goddesses, Shub-Niggurath, and if you're into your chaos gods, then probably Azathoth. So take your pick, really.
On the note of all the wonderful video games coming out now, there is a game called Sucker for Love First Date, which is, I see you've heard of this.
I'm just laughing at the title.
It is about romancing all of the old ones. It is about eldritch abominations. Cthulhu's in there with an amazing hairstyle. The king in yellow is there. The queen in yellow, kind of the princess in yellow. There's a whole lot of eldritch things you can date and romance in various ways. So looking for a follow-up to the Dark Heresy game. This does exist.
Sounds marvelous.
My answer is you have to correct me on my pronunciation here, Mike, but it's Nyarlathotep.
Ah,
Yeah. Nyarlathotep is a very viable one. The trouble with Nyarlathotep is that it has 9,900 forms, so it can be all sorts of things. So yeah.
There's got to be one that you like, right?
Well,
Yes.
I created one which is called the Queen in Red. She hangs around forests and lures people to their doom. So that's quite a cool one.
That is fun. Mike, speaking of things coming back around, I'm not sure if you're familiar with some of Dan's more recent novels for 40K. But he's got a series he's writing. It's part of the Eisenhorn line, and it involves a place called the City of Dust, which is basically Sartosa.
Yeah.
And there is a character called the King or the Yellow King, which is clearly, the King and Yellow. So if you're curious, if you want to link more Cthulhu to 40K, I would say go check those.
Well, yeah, no, Dan's been doing that for years, hasn't he? He's been putting little Easter eggs to various things that inspire him or his loves, and definitely there's a bit of Cthulhu in there from time to time that makes me smile when I read it. But so it's nice to see and hear that he's still up to his old tricks. That's grand. Well done, Dan.
So we're dipping into the Cthulhu mythos a bit here. I was wondering if you had any favorites or recommendations for someone who's not like too into the Cthulhu sphere. They want to read some Lovecraft or Lovecraft mythos works, where they might begin.
Sure, if it's the fiction, then you've got there's a number of ways in. I mean, obviously there is the Lovecraft stories, and obviously most of them you can get for free on most kind of like e-publishing platforms these days, as well as you can buy nice collections. And that's one way in. That's certainly one way in. Obviously, Lovecraft's a bit problematical. Some of the stories are strangely written for a modern reader, and that's before we get to some of the more kind of overt racist kind of tones in some of the work. So it's not necessarily a comfortable read for a lot of people, particularly if you're coming to it new. So it may not be the best place to start in that sense. But there's plenty of other people who have written kind of Lovecraft inspired or Cthulhu inspired kind of fiction, up until the modern day. There's people like Victor Laval, who wrote a story called The Ballad of Black Tom, who basically reimagined one of the original quite racist Lovecraft stories, but reimagined it from an African American perspective. That's pretty cool. But there's stories by there's a contemporary of Lovecraft's called Clark Ashton Smith, who wrote a lot of very kind of horror stuff, but also kind of sword and sorcery, and he's pretty good. There's trying to think, modern reader. There's an English author called Ramsey Campbell, who has written a lot of his early stuff was very Cthulhu inspired, and that's really cool. There's very creepy kind of stuff, and without any of the problems that you get with Lovecraft, if you know what I mean. They're really cool. And a lot of modern authors who write stuff. I mean, not overtly Cthulhu related, but kind of tangential. Is the whole kind of the trilogy written by Jeff Vandermeer. Trying to remember the names of them now. But yeah, Jeff Vandermeer wrote a series of books which are kind of like sci-fi weird tales, which are all about this piece of land that this event has happened in. And that's pretty good too. I mean, there's so many. Great anthologies, which are a good place to start. There's an old anthology called The Children of Cthulhu. There's a whole series of anthologies called Black Wings, Volume 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which are collections of weird kind of Cthulhu-esque kind of fiction. And And within all of that, there's some really good places. Of course, there is another place. It's not necessarily Lovecraftian, but I do a podcast with my friend Paul Fricker, and we write short horror stories. So you can go to our podcast and listen to us tell you a horror story for free. They're all free. So and that's called Mason and Fricker's Eldritch Stories. So just look up eldritchstories.com and you can find our podcast, which is full of short micro fiction, basically. Each of them different horror stories read by myself and Paul. So that's another cool thing you could do if you want to start. But if it's the game Call of Cthulhu, then there's a really easy side to that, because we do a box set called the Call of Cthulhu starter set, and it literally is a starter set, and it's literally a box set where you can start playing straight away, because you start playing with a solo adventure that teaches you how to play the game as you play a solo adventure, and then there's a condensed core set of rules that you can use to play the game. And then it comes with 3 adventures that basically you can start playing with one other person or 2 other people. And then as you play through the different adventures, you can add more players in. So by the end of the game, end of the box that you've run through, you're playing the full game with lots of people. And you can then go on to play any kind of any of the Call of Cthulhu range books. So it's a really cool place to start, is the Call of Cthulhu starter set, if the game is of interest.
The game Call of Cthulhu, of course, has been around for a very long time. It is highly influential, not only on Mike, not only on myself, but on many, many, many people. It's a great game. You should definitely check it out. I'm curious, Mike, if there's any video games you would point people to.
It's tough, because obviously the trouble with video games is they come and go, and there was a game called Call of Cthulhu, which was based on kind of semi-based on the Call of Cthulhu role-playing game. One Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth, and then there was the actual Call of Cthulhu, the video game, which came out a handful of years ago. I think they're kind of still available on things like Steam and maybe PlayStation Store, that kind of thing. But I mean, if you look at games like I mentioned, Half-Life and The Last of Us, they're not Cthulhu inspired in the same way. They've got a definite kind of, they're very close to the kind of feeling for some of those games.
Are you familiar with The Sinking City?
Yeah, the Sinking City is another one that was kind of done as an independent kind of thing, based kind of on Call of Cthulhu unofficially. So that's another one. There's a few out there. I mean, you literally put Cthulhu into your search engine, Cthulhu fiction, Cthulhu video games, Cthulhu role playing. There'll be a lot of results that will lead you into the rabbit hole of all this kind of wonderful weirdness.
Sucker for Love is also on
yeah, play Sucker for Love. There you go. I'm not playing that yet, though. So.
Obviously, Sucker for Love is a little more comedic take on the mythos, but there are ways to get into it. I was personally brought in by the color plates in the 80s version of the Call of Cthulhu core book. There's this one image that's always stuck out in my brain. It's just an open door, and all you can see is this man's arm sticking out of the door with his fingernails ripping furrows into the walls. He's being dragged back into the room. And I was like, okay, I don't know what is happening here, but I have to know more. This game looks amazing.
It is.
Another game that might be a cool pull if you want inspiration is Demon Souls, the original Demon Souls game, which is a FromSoft game, I think, because of Dark Souls, Bloodborne, and so on. Bloodborne, too. Bloodborne is a fantastic Cthulhu-esque thing, but Demon Souls has a pretty extensive reference to the King in Yellow. There's a whole prison full of madmen that's being worked by these tentacled creatures, and there's yellow banners all over the place. And as you ascend this tower, the Tower of Latria, you will find your way up to a pretty distinctly King in Yellow characters covered in these yellow wrappings, and has kind of lost his identity, and it's great fun.
Sounds good.
So if you were to tell someone about Call of Cthulhu who is not familiar, because this channel, we talk about D&D, we talk about Dark Heresy, we talk about a lot of different games. But but if some often I'm often surprised by people that are like, hey, can you tell me more about X or Y? And I'm always like, well, don't you already know? I feel like that's a really well-known thing. And Call of Cthulhu is probably one of those things that I think some of our listeners probably just don't know what it is. So could you break it down? What is Call of Cthulhu, the role-playing game?
Yeah. So as we mentioned, it's a mystery horror game where you play investigators. So you play investigators who are called in to get to the bottom of kind of like occult mysteries. So it could be anything from someone has gone missing to something has gone missing, or a strange event has occurred, and you are called in to try and solve the mystery. Now, equally, it could be where there isn't a mystery as such, but you are in a situation where you all are in a lift or driving in a car, and an event happens. It drags you into an adventure. For instance, there's an adventure called Deadlight that I mentioned earlier, where you're driving in this car, and suddenly this girl stops the car in the middle of the road in the middle of a storm. The rain's coming down, and the girl says, "Stop! Help me! There's been something going on. There's a monster after me. Can you help me?" And you're in the middle of the countryside, in the middle of nowhere. What do? And you're into the game because there's a monster coming. What are you going to do? There's a girl said the monster's coming. What are you going to do? So it's very much kind of like can be very much like a horror film where you get an event and you're kind of trying to deal with it before the monster eats you or the world ends or whatever it could be, or it can be much more kind of slow burn where you are kind of investigating kind of these strange kind of mysteries, and the horror side is there's these kind of alien gods that are like the kind of secret rulers of the cosmos. People like these gods that we mentioned, like Cthulhu and Azathoth and Nyarlathotep, and they're all very different, but they're these kind of alien powers that are so big that the humanity is so small in their estimation that we are kind of meaningless to them, that they don't really care about us. But there are humans among us who worship these kind of godlike entities because they think they're going to get power and riches and wealth and all this kind of stuff from them. And they kind of like they kind of form these cults that want to worship these gods. And these cults do bad things. They kidnap people, they steal things, they cast terrible magical spells that your investigators are trying to stop or trying to prevent or trying to deal with the consequences of. And so you have all these kind of mysteries and challenges you have to kind of overcome. So it's much more kind of narrative storytelling in terms of there's a plot and that you're trying to get to the bottom of, and there's clues you're trying to find, and each clue takes you further into the plot, and you're trying to find who's behind it, what's happening and why, and try and find a way to overcome it and win the day, basically. So it isn't so there is fighting sometimes, but sometimes you don't want to fight because the monsters don't care about bullets, so we need to do something else. So it's a lot of puzzle solving kind of things. And traditionally, the game is set in the 1920s. So the Roaring Twenties with the Jazz Age and Prohibition and gangsters. So it can be kind of cool, kind of playing in a different era. But equally, as I've mentioned, Call of Cthulhu you can play in any time. So we have the kind of late Victorian gaslight streets kind of Cthulhu, and you can play modern day right now as if it's modern day, and you tend to play kind of regular people who are drawn into this kind of other world really that's kind of beyond the norm, and you are very fragile. You're like anyone else. It's not like a game like D&D where you can kind of almost like superpowers and you can take lots of hits from dragons and all that kind of thing. In Call of Cthulhu, you are just like us. You're just like human. So if you get shot in the game, you're probably going to die in the game in your character. So you want to avoid that. You want to use your head and come up with better ways to deal with the situation rather than just pumping bullets into something. So it comes down to kind of like trying to overcome these challenges and puzzles and so forth. And so it can be very engaging. And all the while, obviously, you're developing your character and building your character skills. And it works on a percentile system, so a D100. So it's very intuitive because you have all these different skills. You could be very skilled at climbing or psychology or archaeology or reading these ancient languages or so on. And they're all based on a percentile skill. So if you've got 70% in climbing, that means you're a pretty good climber. And so it's very intuitive. So you can work out very quickly what you're good at, what you're not good at, and you can improve these skills over time as you play the game. So it's quite good for kind of developing your character and building backstories and developing all these kind of things as well. So it's the beauty of the game is that you can play in a variety of ways. You can play it as a one shot where you can literally kind of play like it's the horror film. So all bets are off. You have your characters in the horror film, and they might survive, they might not, but you got to get to the end of the session. Or you could play like a big campaign, which goes over many sessions of play. We've got some campaigns. There's a big one called The Masks of Nyarlathotep, which is a 2-volume slipcase, which is basically worth, if you want it to be, you can spend 2+ years playing this whole campaign, which is a world-spanning campaign from all these different countries, uncovering this massive conspiracy that could end the world. And that's kind of one end of the extreme to the other extent, where you could play a 1-hour scenario with one other person and have a great and have equally amounts of fun. So the game is very versatile, but ultimately, if you like mysteries, you like kind of developing your character, and you like combating strange cults and monsters and weird alien gods, then Cthulhu would be worth a try.
And I would
all that kind of stuff I like. So it's kind of like a bit like Dark Heresy. It's kind of similar. If you like investigating dark cults and strange conspiracies, then Call of Cthulhu is kind of a game you probably would enjoy.
I should point out that Chaosium has a bit of a trademark, if you will, of creating massive, really long campaigns that are very strongly supported. There's a great one for Pendragon called the Great Pendragon Campaign, and then there's, as he pointed out, the Masks of Nyarlathotep, and there's also Horror on the Orient Express, which is a really good one as well. So check those out.
On the topic of that versatility also, I'll note that much in the way that, in a similar fashion how D&D is used to run a lot of different kinds of games in America, in Japan, Call of Cthulhu is the default system. People will run all sorts of custom games in the Call of Cthulhu system. It works really well for this. I would say it works far better than a D20 system. D100s are awesome, but I've seen all sorts of wacky things done using this setting. I've seen like people playing as adventures where they're turned into beavers and need to find out why, like all sorts of nonsense, and it runs fantastically well.
Yeah, Call of Cthulhu is certainly the biggest role-playing game in Japan. So far bigger than D&D in that sense.
Huge.
So as you know, with a lot of anime stories, anime stories go from very kind of cozy, kind of nice Studio Ghibli kind of things to extreme bizarre weirdness, and so Call of Cthulhu fits right into that scale somewhere. So
okay, so how soon are we going to get the J horror supplement with the ring and the grudge?
We've just released one. So last year we released 2 books called The Sutra of Pale Leaves, Volume 1 and 2, and they are a series of adventures that can be played as standalone one-off games, or you can combine them into a kind of into a campaign, and they're all set in Japan in the 1980s. And so you've got one that's set in the kind of the manga kind of fan community. There's one set in kind of the Japanese fashion kind of era. There's another one set with early video games when you are dealing with kind of multi-user dungeons and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
really,
I remember those days.
Yeah. And so, but all these are kind of Call of Cthulhu adventures. So they're all got some weirdness and stuff going on. And one of them trades off kind of Japanese folklore and so on. And they're really great. I mean, so if you enjoy that kind of J horror kind of thing, the Sutra of Pale Leaves, there's 2 volumes. You can play one or the other volume, or combine them together, whatever you want to do. But they are exactly that kind of thing, that kind of give you a taste of Call of Cthulhu in a different kind of vibe, basically.
This reminds me of the game World of Horror. Fantastic game, very much Cthulhu mythos inspired, very Japanese, quite difficult. So as we're kind of winding down here, I was curious to know if you had any advice for GMs or for players who are at a table where they're doing a horror/investigation style of game.
Yeah, I mean, it's there's so many different things. I mean, the easiest thing to say is I've done 2 books. In the actual Call of Cthulhu main rule book, the Keeper rule book, there's a whole chapter of advice on how to get the most out of your games, how to be a good kind of GM. And obviously I would say, a lot of good stuff is in there because that's what we wrote in the book. There's also a book we published a couple of years ago called Keeper's Tips. And it's a small little book. In fact, I got one to hand. I got one here. I'll show you. It's a small little pocket book that you can get from the Chaosium website, or if you come to one of our stands at a game show. It's just a little book like this, which is full of tips on to be a better GM, basically a better keeper, and how to run, lots of cool ideas. And so these are full. But if I give you an idea now, what I would say, one of the things about Call of Cthulhu is it's a set, it's often set in a historical period, which it could be modern day, but it could be 1920s, it could be sometime else. And similarly, Dark Heresy is set in a specific setting, yeah? And none of us know everything. None of us know. So if I'm playing a game in the 1920s for Call of Cthulhu, or if I'm running Dark Heresy in the Imperium of the far future, I don't know every detail from the 1920s or the 40K universe. I know a bit, but I don't know that much. And so one of the tips is to not worry about it. So the tip is don't worry about it, but whatever you do, just try and be consistent. So if you decide on the fly that in the 1920s there were flying cars, yeah. Now we know there weren't flying cars, but let's just say you say something like that, yeah. That just becomes part of your game, and say, yeah, there are flying cars, and that's what we're going to go with. I've made the decision, go with it. Just don't worry about it, because the players will go along with you. I'm using an extreme silly example, but what I'm trying to say is don't sweat it. Just go with it. Don't worry about knowing everything. You don't need to know everything. Concentrate on the game and let the setting just roll itself out, because the players will help you do that. But just concentrate on the players and what they do, and you'll have a good game. If you worry about all these other things, you're not worrying about the players, and that's what you should be worrying about, is ensuring that you're having a good game and the players are having a good game. And if you can do that, then everything's fine. So that's my top tip for any role-playing game. Focus on the players. Don't worry about everything else.
I'd be so tempted to lean into the New England accent, the JFK accent. Oh no, it's a nameless horror for beyond the stars.
Absolutely.
I would be so tempted to do the, he's wicked smart. Look at him. Oh yeah.
My boy's investigating.
So one example I've read about how to explain the idea, the mythos, or the cosmic horror aspect is to imagine yourself as an ant on a circuit board. You're seeing all these shapes and lines, and you're seeing textures and dimensions that make no sense to you because the ant doesn't understand what a circuit board is or how it functions. But to that ant, they are colossal cyclopean creations that fit some ancient pattern that is beyond their understanding. And I've always loved that comparison.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that kind of things are so big, and the whole kind of concept of deep time being so vast that it's unimaginable. Literally billions upon billions upon billions of years. It becomes meaningless in our lifespan because we can't comprehend that as a time span of time. But that kind of concept of deep time is another way of thinking about that these things are on a different scale to us, and that we only, the way I describe a lot of the monsters is we can only see them through the dimensions that we comprehend. We only see so many dimensions, whereas these things exist beyond those dimensions into other dimensions. So we only see bits of them. We can only make sense of the bits we see. We never see the entirety, because if we could see the entirety of them, we couldn't comprehend it, because our brain can't function like that. It's not built to function on a multi-dimensional level, and so we just blow our minds basically.
And that's where we get insanity points.
There you go. So that leads to sanity points.
We got a great super chat from Biofoot, our Fishman enthusiast. He says, "When are we getting a Cthulhu pinup calendar?"
Well, whenever you want to start one, and if you want to get some people together to pose, then we can I guess. I think that's a fan fiction kind of thing rather than official.
April Fool's Day announcement from Chaosium.
Yeah. The Firefighters of Innsmouth calendar.
The deep sea rescuers of Innsmouth. Yeah.
Now we're talking. So yeah, that's really cool. I was curious. What would you say makes a good scenario for Call of Cthulhu? What are the aspects that come together to make the best Call of Cthulhu scenarios?
Well, it's very similar for any role-playing game, is coming up with stuff that would engage your players. And because often I read a lot of scenarios, and obviously a lot of them are written with lots of words for people that never happen. There's lots of information that never happens in the game. So, for instance, a massive backstory about what happened 2,000 years ago that the players in the game are never going to know. It's literally the only person that's ever going to know is the GM that's reading that. But all of that is completely irrelevant to the actual game. And the game is the bit that involves the players. So focus on the players. So the kind of structuring is kind of like trying to ensure that there's a really good hook, something that really interests the people to bring them into the game. So that kind of a good setup, a good hook that kind of gets them why they want to investigate the mystery. For instance, it could be they need to find this stolen artifact, because if they don't find it, they're all cursed in some way. That the artifact is the only way that will save them from all melting, because they've all been cursed by something. Therefore, they're committed to now, we've got to find this thing, not just because we've got to find it, because it's the only way we can stop from melting into pools of flesh and dying, basically. So trying to find an interesting plot device that will hook them in, and then having interesting characters and locations that kind of are interesting for the players to interact with, and then allowing the end of the scenario to be dictated by the players. So having a range of ideas how the scenario could end, rather than having one idea that the players must follow to finish, because the players might not do that. They might do something completely different. It might be that you, as the designer of the scenario, think the only way this ends is in a big fight. Well, what if all your characters aren't kind of combat characters, and they're all kind of avoid combat? So they're never going to have a big fight because they know they're all going to die. So that ending doesn't work for those. So you need to have a kind of a range of options to kind of help the GM construct an ending that works for the players and the way that the game is run, rather than one single version of an ending, because that may or may not work for the style of game that's occurred. So good ideas, good hooks, lots of cool things you can do for the players or with the players, and then flexibility that it can go where the players want to go without it being too much of a straitjacket for them, basically.
Well, I know you have to leave our show, unfortunately. I would like to say that you are a great creator of role-playing games, someone that I look up to, certainly. And I'm one of the things I was telling Vera is I'm so excited to have you join our show because I'm such a big fan. So love having you join us, Mike, and everything that you do is great. So keep up the awesome work you're doing over there.
Yeah,
Well,
likewise, Dark Heresy is what got me into tabletop RPGs as a whole. It's what sucked me into the whole Warhammer verse. Your work set the stage for me to do what I do now professionally, so I'm very grateful.
Same.
Well, I'm very grateful for the invite, and to I'm very humbled. Really, it's lovely to hear that some of my work has helped to influence you guys, and it's in a positive way, and that you're it's helped in some way to just you to have a good time at the gaming table, but also to be creative in your own ways, to kind of help to fuel your creativity in some way, hopefully. So that's really, really lovely to hear. So thank you. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. And I'm sorry I've got to leave a little early, so my apologies to everyone else. But I hope you all have a great rest of the week. And if you are at any of the conventions that I happen to be at in the next year or so, please do come and say hello. Please come and tap me on the shoulder and say, hi, you don't know me, but I'm such and such, and I play this, or I'm really interested in that, and let's have a chat. So please come and say hello, and always nice to meet new friends. So yeah,
awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Cheers, and have a great day.
Lovely to meet you. Thanks so much.
Thanks again. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Bye. So it's just you and me now for the rest of the episode, which is fine. I think we have plenty to talk about. Mike is a hell of a guest, and learning all about Call of Cthulhu, I think, was just outstanding.
What a guy. Wow, that was pretty darn cool.
For real. I wanted to ask him about horror cinema because I know he's a big movie buff. And for me, like I would say from the last few years, some of the bigger horror movies that I thought were really, really good were things like Weapons and
fantastic.
Late Night with the Devil. I really enjoyed.
Also fantastic. Much more, let's say, mythos-esque than Weapons, though.
Oh yeah, well, but Weapons you could make that a Cthulhu for sure.
I would say, tonally it doesn't quite get there, though, because it's Zach Kreger, who, of course, is his background in comedy, and it's a hilarious movie, which I think few Cthulhu books are.
Well, yeah. Hey, we got a fun super chat from Skylar Martin. Really appreciate you, Skylar. You're helping us out a lot today. My players spoil me. They take the Gimli route to my plot threads. Certainty of death, small chance of success. What are we waiting for?
Yeah.
I mean, getting buy-in from your players is big. Like Mike was talking about for Cthulhu, there is that expectation that your character could go mad or die. Call of Cthulhu is not a safe game. You don't play Call of Cthulhu. You're there for a good time, not a long time.
Yeah, it's you're on a doom timer, right? Which is shared between Call of Cthulhu and a lot of the Warhammer games. Things get worse and worse until your character is no more. They cannot handle it anymore.
Listening to him, I gotta admit, I was just sitting there thinking, man, I wish I had this conversation, 20 years ago, because I'm not going to say Dark Heresy would have taken a much different turn. I think it would have been very, very similar, but I think I would have probably leaned a little more into the Cthulhu-esque side, the investigative side. If I had this conversation with Mike and had a chance to talk to Alan and John and T.S. Lukert and Owen Barnes, just get to absorb all that knowledge before. But just like Mike was put in the hot seat and given months, here you go, make this game. That's kind of my experience. I was put in the hot seat, given months to say, here you go, continue Dark Heresy, make it happen.
I think you did great.
I mean, I'm definitely proud of what I accomplished, but just listening to him and learning a lot of his mindset, it makes you think. It makes you reflect, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, we're constantly influenced, such as the creative process, right? Always taking in new info.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you. So you work on projects that are Warhammer related, and
Yeah.
do you ever get a chance to talk to the creators or talk to the lead developer in a way that you get that kind of guidance, that kind of mentorship?
Yeah, we've had a lot of internal meetings, just talking about theme and concept and stuff. I've had the chance to speak to Andy Wah more recently, which has always been a wonderful time. And I feel like I've been well oriented there. I've not gone out of my way to reach out to folks who are like legacy contributors, though. Maybe I should. This like inspires me to send a couple of cold emails, which might be a little warmer if I politely ask some of the Lorebeards to say like, "Hi, could you introduce me?" But
Lorebeards and Roleplay is a really good way to get them involved. Just saying. Guests
begging for sage wisdom, please.
I think we could have more guests on the show. Certainly, Mike was a great guest. We like I said, we had Kaiser on the 40K side, and I'd like to talk to more creators here about their projects. And I mean, Mike is Call of Cthulhu, like he is the apex guy for that particular line. So there's nobody better to talk to about Call of Cthulhu than him.
Well, it's so cool to hear him say that like for 40 years it's been his favorite system, and like he's now running the show, right? He's very much in charge of the direction things take there at Chaosium. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. We love to see it.
Yeah, and I mean, I know I've hit it a lot in this episode, but there is a strong connection of legacy between Call of Cthulhu to Dark Heresy to back to Call of Cthulhu to Batman to all of these things. Almost there is a lot of connections in pop culture if you look for them, and surprisingly, there's a decent amount of role-playing game stuff that's underpinning a lot of our biggest properties in pop culture. Batman is connected to Call of Cthulhu, literally the role-playing game. Most of what we know about Star Wars comes from the Star Wars role-playing game. The Star Trek role-playing game helped define what Klingons were like. Game of Thrones is based on a role-playing game. Go ahead.
A lot of big nerds play tabletop games, folks. Where this is
sincerely. So yeah, I mean, and I just named Game of Thrones and Batman and these are big properties. You know, a lot of people don't know or underestimate the impact of role-playing games on our culture as it stands today. So I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I don't remember. I want to talk about Vin Diesel now. Who, of course, is like a huge RPG guy, and I think he's making the sequel to his movie based on his D&D character, right?
Yeah, The Last Witch Hunter is getting a sequel. Yeah, with Michael Caine's coming out of retirement to star in that, which is very surprising.
We're blessed. We truly are. This is a good day. This is important stuff. I do think there's that real connection there. You're right. There's a lot of these points of contact, and some of these like legacy series, legacy franchises really have been influential on each other, on many more things. So like Warhammer itself has had tons of impact on so many properties, right? Like the new Glitch production, Legends of Guinevere, or something like Knights of Guinevere, is like distinctly Warhammer inspired in a bunch of ways. They've fused that with sort of a grudge against Disney to create an amazing aesthetic.
Oh, I'd have to check that out.
There are
a link to that after the show, please.
Absolutely, yes. There are designs that are like affirmatively inspired by like the custodies and so on. It's I think it's distinct.
Well, you could look at the the Zack Snyder shows on Netflix. What is that? Rebel Moon, and see pretty strong Warhammer connections. StarCraft, of course, and Warcraft are both heavily influenced by Warhammer.
One of the smash hits from like indie gaming from last year, Look Outside, definitely a Cthulhu mythos inspired thing. It's like proper Elder Torah, like being warped by observation of the unknown. It's great. It's great.
And even True Detective from just a few years ago. It was heavily influenced by Cthulhu and I want to say Delta Green as well. So,
oh yeah.
Yeah, Delta Green, guys, is literally my favorite role playing game I've never played. I've always wanted to try it. It's so cool.
Maybe we'll have a chance, perhaps.
That'd be fun, and we could probably get some of the Arc Dream guys on to talk about that at some point because they do share a foundation with Call of Cthulhu. That would be a lot of fun to kind of talk them through that process as well.
Yeah, I look forward to having more guests on.
Now, what are some things you do to create dread and fear at the game table without shock, without just shock value? You know, how do you do it?
Well, shock value to me is the payoff of dread and fear, right? It cannot exist without either creating that atmosphere first or doing something sudden and cheap, like slamming the table. To me, there's a few kinds of horror, and one of the most famous, like fear of the unknown, you know? Fear of the inevitable works also. Dread can be created through constant presence. It can be created through something that works but cannot be seen. And you deliver on those, and it's sort of release. It's a relief. It's no longer as scary once it appears, right? So that element of the mystery of the threat is, to me, where a lot of the horror lies. The less possible it is to fully understand something, the more intriguing and terrifying it can be.
That's a really good point. That's a really good point.
Thank you.
I have friends who have described tactics that lend more towards theatrical, like they'll dim the lights and only use candles to light the room, or they'll, walk around behind the group rather than sit at the head of the table like a typical DM. But both of those things, I think, are, and I hate to say this, but they are kind of theatrical, and that problem with theatrics is if it lands, great. If it doesn't land, it's more distracting and funny than anything else.
Well, they're in service of this idea, though, because if you're walking around behind somebody, you're creating a little bit of unease. You're disrupting the normal flow of what's happening. Dimming the lights changes the atmosphere. It makes things unfamiliar and uncertain. Like, it's the same essence, I think.
Yeah, I mean, again, those things can work. I want to be really clear. They definitely can. But I think for me, the number one thing for a horror game, and I've ran a horror game for a number of years, was the number one thing was getting buy-in, getting everybody on board, saying this is a horror game. You're going. The purpose of being here is to freak yourself out a little bit.
Yep. If there's one person who's just like super not into it, and they're like, "I'm not afraid of anything. I'd charge through the door," it kind of ruins the mood.
Yeah, everybody's got to be on board. It's dread, which, I mean, to define the term, dread is really, it's a form of fear that is the apprehension of something that is imminent, right? Dread is like something's about to happen. Fear is more like something's happening, I need to get the hell out of here, right? That's the difference between the two things.
One of the greatest gifts you can give to your GM as a player is being genuinely freaked out by something. Having your character like not okay with what's going on. This is a blessing because it will carry. It will make everybody upset. Well, this is good.
In our being a good player episode, you hit the nail on the head. You talked about this a lot. The sell, you need to sell it. The kayfabe, you need to be in it to win it, and you need to sell it. A good player at a horror table will not be checked out. A good player at a horror table will be like, okay, I'm here to be scared, and I'm going to help everybody else by reacting as if I'm actually scared. Selling it, right? That's a big part of it.
Yes, welcome to Lorebeards and role-playing and wrestling comparisons.
We do this a lot.
Well, it works, because much like in an ongoing wrestling storyline, you're trying to preserve the atmosphere, trying to establish characterization, trying to create hype moments and aura, all of these things. It's a comparable passion, I would say.
Well, I think another thing you can take from wrestling is the idea of consistency, right? Like they have their own supernatural wrestler, The Undertaker. And part of the reason why The Undertaker worked is because they were consistent. They never changed that tone. They never changed that vibe for a very long time. It was very consistent. Whenever you saw The Undertaker, it was this music, this action, this expression, this tone, this vibe, right? I mean, would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And they never really made him funny either. He was distinctly horrific. He was like kind of an ominous presence. And they had to deliver on that. They had to have other people like sell his persona for it to work.
So that's the why I would talk about the buy-in and say, okay, if for the Undertaker to work, the audience has to put aside their disbelief and put aside their joking around and kind of buy into the idea that the Undertaker is this zombie dude, right? Like you have to go for it.
Yeah, and like that's established over time. You have to earn that. Like, I think that for recurring villains, this can work the same way, where you introduce a character who is teased at, and the reactions of established characters you help sell what they're supposed to be, and then you build them up over time in this way. Because if you just like take the Undertaker in isolation, he's kind of ridiculous. To make him awesome, it has to come through his consistent persona, the way that he's brought forward. You can't show him in full lighting and so on.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of the thing you were talking about, which is knowledge. The when you show the monster, it loses some of the scariness, right?
Kane.
And the way I did this in my game is I introduced the monster. They were exploring a asylum, which was empty. So it's not abandoned, but it's an empty asylum, which, I mean, that's a great start just right off the bat. But then I would sprinkle clues as to what they might be dealing with as they went. So over time, as the investigation proceeded through the asylum, they were learning more and more about what they might be facing. And that was building up the monster in their head. Now, when I finally revealed it, I felt like I did okay. But no matter what I was going to present, it was never going to be quite as scary as what they had already built up in their minds. But the dread they felt leading up to that encounter, that's the payoff. Like,
yes.
They don't have to go home and be terrified and have nightmares for it to be a successful horror game. They just have to feel legitimate dread. And if you can do that, they're going to come back and want more.
Yeah, the journey really is the destination, because like any creature with a stat block you put in front of them, the second there's a stat block, it's no longer scary, because they're thinking through combat options, they're calculating their turn, they're gonna obliterate it, right? They're gonna do something bad to this thing. The nature of it as like a threat is more powerful, right? Because like I've been playing Resident Evil 9 recently, right? I stream video games. Whoa. And I think that it's far scarier when it's establishing its threats than when you're there. Because like the first like hour and a half of the game, I was screaming. I was fucking terrified. There was all sorts of ominous nonsense happening, like creepy stalkers and unsettling noises and sudden jolts and things. And then I got the gun. And after I got the gun, I was having a really cool time. So it changes the energy when you can solve the threat. What's the thing that you can interact with, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, video games do this in some interesting ways. They often will have some kind of audio cue or visual cue to indicate that the monster is nearby or that it's doing something. I go back to Left 4 Dead and the witches, where you would hear them crying.
Fantastic.
You'd hear the witch sobbing, and you'd be like, oh, there's a witch nearby. Now, you may already know that you can beat that witch. May already know that you have the gear and the skills to beat that witch. But just the fact that you can hear it, but you don't know where it is, that's one layer. And then actually your familiarity with the monster can work against you in that case, because you're like, oh, that's actually dangerous. Where's
anticipation?
Where's the rest of my crew? And then you can throw in, in a role play game instead of a video game, you can actually throw in some things that they can react to, like the sobbing is actually words, and it's actually referencing something that the player knows about. And it's, the more intimate you get with the player character too, that also helps foster dread.
Yeah, like instead of fear of the unknown, the witch is fear of the known. It is a threat that will deliver, because the witch, if you're not familiar, it will kill you. It will instantly down you unless you perform a skilled series of maneuvers. You can like kill it in one shot if you're really good. But there's tension in trying to do that also, because if you mess up, you're done. So the fact that it's a credible, guaranteed threat maintains that tension. It makes getting past it kind of eerie. And even as you move past the thing, the way it moves, it's always kind of on the verge of getting up and attacking you. Very effective, very effective.
Yeah, so I would say this is a tool you can use at the tabletop, is to find some really good sounds that you can play to represent your monsters. I've been playing Fallout New Vegas again because season 2 Fallout has got me thinking about it. And nice. the ghouls in Fallout New Vegas have a particular sound when they see you or when they know that you're there, and it's this kind of awful croaking scream. And I love it. I love the fact that no matter how powerful a character I am, whenever I hear that scream, I'm like, oh shit, put my back up against something and get my gun out. Like, I know I can kill it if I know where it is, right? And that's the interesting thing there. So
yeah, like there's a lot of effective stuff you can do there. If you have audio cues, you can possibly do things that are outside the scope of play. You can tee up your characters or your players, like let them know something's kind of happening. Consistency helps here a lot, though. If you use some kind of cue and don't call attention to it, but it keeps happening before something bad happens, they will start to get nervous. This is like Pavlovian stuff.
Yeah, and it could be anything. It could be eerie piping or someone whispering. You'll have to decide what it is for your game. But would you like to read this super chat?
Yes, thank you, Fokino, for the chat. As a GM, my favorite horror design is always the unsettling shape or the impossible room. Color out of space. The thing can't exist, but it's here. Yes. Something that just does not make sense can be very effective. It creates a sense of unease, a weird wariness. House of Leaves does this, right?
Yes.
Yeah. There's just something wrong. You don't know why, and it is unknown. It is uncomfortable. The space is no longer safe, right? And in fact, taking away the sense of safety can be super effective. Taking it in place that should be sort of sacrosanct and making it into a dangerous, unknown, unfamiliar location is super effective. RE9 does this. It's a scary game. You can do this in a few ways, like introduce something wrong in your character's like home base. You can't be cheap about this because they'll get sensitive. They want to like have things that feel safe, but you can do this a couple of times and it'll be really effective.
Yeah, Stephen King wrote about this when he was talking about creating horrors. He likes to find something normal and then find something slightly wrong with it, and then that's going to spiral your brain into thinking why that's wrong. And his example is, your neighbor has a very well-maintained yard. It's super green. It's cut to the exact length. It just looks really good. It's Homes and Gardens, front lawn, right? And one day you see a bloody sock lying in the middle of that lawn. And your mind is going to create connections between why is that lawn so perfect and that bloody sock.
Yeah, it's unusual. Anything that invites curiosity that also threatens you is fantastic. There's like an evolutionary biology angle to this. Some people think the uncanny valley is due to people recoiling from corpses. It looks human, but it's not. This is dangerous. This will make me sick. This could be a problem. This can kind of apply to like anything, right? It's why early AI images were so freaky. There's like something wrong with this. What's happening here? This isn't a person. My arms are too long.
Exactly. In my Shadows Angelus game, I intentionally made the creatures that they were facing, I tried to make them as unsettling as I could. I wanted the scars from facing these creatures to be mostly on the inside. so I described them as something that was so unnatural, so wrong, that it would spontaneously create tumors and nausea in people. Like it would just, being near one of these things, you would start to like have cancer, or horrible pustules would break out in your face. Just like your body would react to this thing being there by mutating or warping itself a little bit, which is very 40K as well. So
mutations,
right. I mean that, but putting it in the context of this is the creature's impact on reality is so wrong that there is some sort of blowback from it. I thought that was kind of neat.
Yeah, no, it's a cool effect because the cause and effect is evidenced by what's happening, but it doesn't make intuitive sense. And that can also be kind of eerie when something works, but you don't know why, right?
Yeah, Call of Cthulhu, of course, and Dark Heresy both have insanity points as a mechanic, and your characters can get more and more unhinged over time. My rogue trader, Sarvis Trask, never got any corruption, but he got tons of insanity.
Yeah, that's the way. Let's go.
And one of the best ways to use this is to work, in my opinion, one of the best ways to use this is to work with the player and say, okay, what are some expressions of insanity that you would find interesting?
For sure. I think it's ideal, in fact, when madness and corruption lead to thematic things, because it's more character forward, more narrative forward. I'm not really fond of the first mutation being something that just destroys the character, makes them unable to like interact with normal society. It's perhaps setting appropriate, but it is often anti-narrative. So
one of my players in my Shadows Angelus game, which is my most Call of Cthulhu-esque that experience, that's why I'm bringing it up so often. But they went into like the worst possible place in that setting, and his character failed a fairly important role. So after the game, we talked about like, this is going to have an impact on you. I want to leave a scar on the inside. And what we came up with was every time after that he saw an insect, like a fly or a roach or any kind of insect, it always had a human face.
Ooh.
Right. And literally that was it. Like, that's the only thing that happens to you is from now on, whenever you see an insect, it has a human face. But that was pretty, it bothered him. Like, that was something that he wanted because it was something that bothered him on a deep level. And he would bring it up. Like, I wouldn't even have to mention it. He'd just be like, my character goes and sits in the corner, and then he sees a fly and he gets up and moves to the other side of the room.
Yeah, like that's the kind of thing where if it's role played well, it'll unsettle everybody at the table. Like, something is wrong here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, unusual behavior like that can do a lot also. Somebody acting in a manner that is consistently strange, like, adds to that unsettling air. It does a lot. Player buy-in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we could do a whole episode on horror gaming, and we might. Who knows? SLA Industries, by the way, is something that Mike pointed out as one of his big influences. It's a really interesting game, and I think we should cover it at some point. The short version is it's a little bit like a Dream City cyberpunk-esque. It's interesting enough that we could devote a show to it, and I think it'd be a lot of fun to do. But so would Delta Green. Yeah,
there's a lot of games I want to cover. I think we're gonna have more interviews on in the future. We might talk to people who are legacy devs, well-known. We talk to folks who are making newer indie games, all sorts of stuff. So I'm excited.
One of my main takeaways from Mike's contribution today is I need to go get those J-horror books, because those sound awesome.
That does sound kind of rad. I recommend World of Horror. Please play World of Horror. It's so cool. I will send you a link. It's really interesting.
For the listeners, why don't you explain what World of Horror is?
World of Horror is a black and white roguelike traditional dungeon crawl-esque adventure game, and it is a really difficult, really well executed iterative run-based Cthulhu mythos inspired J-horror game. It's neat. It's really neat. It's grotesque. It's pulling from a lot of aspects of Japanese urban legends. It is challenging in a way that appeals to my gamer masochism. It is like really nice. It is a fun game. I had a whole phase where I played like a lot of hours of that a few months back, like around October in 2025. So,
is this a video game?
Yeah. It's on Steam.
Okay. That's why I was just double checking. I was like, are we talking about a role playing game or a video game?
It has a very distinct style. I would say that some of the adventures are like appropriate probably for a tabletop campaign, but it's basically a love letter to Lovecraft and Junji Ito, and it pulls from like that kind of aesthetic. So super neat.
Awesome. Well, we are just about out of time, so I was going to ask you for your final thoughts on Dark Heresy, Call of Cthulhu, Mike Mason, the whole deal.
Mike Mason's really cool, and D100 systems are really good. These are my thoughts.
I love the fact that you love D100. Gotta admit, I struggled with it a little bit, and especially when we got to Deathwatch, it was really hard to find a way to make the dice work at that scale. We figured it out, and like later, like the Dark Heresy 2nd edition has done some things with it that make it even better. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 4th edition has evolved that concept and made it better. So over time, D100 has evolved and grown quite a bit as a system.
I believe in the promise of the percentile die. I like granularity. We'll talk about this. Any closing thoughts yourself?
Well, I think I've said it all. He said, Mike is a big inspiration to me, and finding out that he actually was offered my job and then turned it down. Wow. I was like, oh, thank God. Thank God he said no. Jesus. Can you imagine? I mean, I have no idea where I'd be right now if I hadn't done Dark Heresy. That's kind of the beginning of, it's not the beginning of my role-playing game career, but it's the beginning of my career as a game designer, The
different paths unfurl. This too is part of the the Eldritch horror. What might have been.
And we still need to work on a sign-off for this show, I think, because I really want to do one.
We'll workshop this. We got some plans to make, some evil schemes to brew.
But that's it for this week's episode of Lorebeards and Roleplaying. Catch us again on Monday, 2 p.m. Mountain Time. And, of course, if you want to know more about what we're up to and maybe even vote on what we're going to talk about in the future episodes, check out our Discord.
Yeah, check out the Lorebeards Zone. I'll be live on Twitch tomorrow playing some horror games. I am still playing RE9. It's been great fun.
I need to start learning how to stream on Twitch because I have committed to streaming Rogue Trader. So there's that.
I will teach you the method. I am excited for this. I'm stoked for your Rogue Trader playthrough.
Sensei, teach me. I would like to learn.
I have learned several things about this. We'll convene. But for now, I think we are going to sign off. Thank you guys so much again. Big thanks to Mike Mason, who is amazing.
Yep, absolutely. And catch you guys next week. Cheers.